Thank you, Chairman. Commissioner Anselmi Dalton,
Present.
Commissioner Craig,
Here.
Commissioner Glick, excused,
He's running late.
Commissioner Hosey, excused, Commissioner Kelly,
Here.
Commissioner Cott,
Here.
Commissioner Lawson,
Here.
Commissioner Pence,
Here.
Commissioner Suker.
Here.
Chairman, we have a quorum.
Thank you. Okay, so I guess we'll go ahead and proceed. Director Mead.
Thanks, Madam Chair. So just a little overview. First thing we have up is a sponsor contingency account request. I wouldn't ask you guys to take action on it until tomorrow, but want to just have some of that conversation today to hopefully make tomorrow manageable. Apologize for the Select Water Committee. I didn't anticipate there being any topics for Select Water Committee from my first kind of contact with the LSO. And so we decided we were going to shove everything into one day because last year we had a short day. Our Wednesday was short and we were hoping we could move on to Thursday stuff, but sponsors weren't there, all that stuff. So anyway, might be a little bit of a long day tomorrow. Depends how many questions everybody has. And then Thursday, Select Water Committee is going to meet first thing in the morning. And then I'll just talk a little bit about kind of the thought process we went through for the recommendations you're going to hear tomorrow, and then give you guys a couple of updates for the GID tunnels and the LaPrelle Dam situation and the reconstruction project as well. So with that, I will turn it over to Bill Brewer, and he'll go through the sponsor contingency account request.
Chairman, Commissioners, Bill Brewer, Deputy Director of Construction. We have project for sponsors contingency. This is a 2019 project. I've gone through several times about these 2019, 2020 projects that are still coming up. Had quite a bit of issues with COVID inflation. Honestly, this project didn't come in that bad compared to some, but definitely over. Original project budget was a little over 1.8 million. Bids came in a little high. We're actually looking now about a 50% increase. Like I said, with these projects that we had budgets before COVID, probably between 20 and 80%, most of them in that 40 to 60 range over. This is a backup well system, so it's a good project to move forward. The town and engineer has been very good to work with as far as looking at cost savings options, adjusting things. So we appreciate that. But we are basically what the sponsor is requesting. This project has already been awarded. They are going to cover the cost one way or the other out of their own reserves. However, they would appreciate if we could help them with some of that so they don't empty out the reserves to get this project done. So they're asking for $284,064, which is approximately 23% of the original project. And that would bring them to about a 55-45 match on this project. This was originally a 67-33 project, so now we're coming down to about 55-45. So I believe that's very fair. I have Kevin, which is the Public Works Director, and Jeff, who is the engineer. So if we have any specific questions, they can probably help answer those on this project.
Madam Chair,
Commissioner Suker.
I guess I do. That's quite a lot of difference from the original 2019 till we get to today. But I guess my real concern is, how did we get 2019 up to 2024? That's a long time. It seems like, why couldn't it have been done, I guess, quicker or earlier? The other question that I have is, has the sponsor, or have you looked for other resources besides commission here, such as the SLIB or any other form of financing?
Commissioner Chair Jeff Barron with WWDC Engineering. To answer your two-part question, This project was a little different than what's traditionally done with water development, meaning it went through a level 1 and then jumped immediately to a level 3. And included in that level 3 was the feasibility study, where we evaluated 8 wells as part of the package and ultimately found that 7 were feasible for this project. So there were 2 construction activities that occurred. One that built the wells and tested them and validated their ability to serve the city of Buffalo. And then the secondary construction, which then connects the wells with pumps and pipes to the water treatment plant. Those steps prolonged the process in and amongst the inflationary and material costs in between. And while working through that process, we worked very closely with the Water Development Commission office to reduce and ultimately change the design significantly to address these cost concerns. And then if you could repeat the second part of your question.
The second part was, have you looked at any other alternative financing other than the Water Development Commission? In other words,
Chairman,
have you
Commissioner,
been to the SLIB or any other funding agencies that could support you with your?
we have, early on in the project, we sought ARPA funds to subsidize this project. The original application was denied, but while they're doing the reevaluation of the ARPA funds and the potential redistribution, we sent a letter to the governor asking if there are any spillover funds that they be made available, or at least this project considered, since it was evaluated in that first step. Additionally, we have applied for an MRG grant for this project as well. That will not be decided until February, but it's another component to help subsidize and alleviate some costs to the city of Buffalo for this project.
So your application is in at the SLIB, but you do have one in?
Commissioner, that's true. We do have one in. We have two applications for other funding sources in, but the decisions will not be made until
Right.
in the later months.
But what I'm really wondering, you knew the shortfall was there even a year ago, or is that correct, or maybe not?
Chairman, Commissioner, that's not correct. We had a budgetary estimate that we knew there could be a shortfall, but we had to wait until the construction estimates came in before we knew the actual shortfall.
All right, that's all I have, but thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any other questions? I have one quick question, I guess. Would the money revert then to us, or are you just going to revert it? I know that City of Buffalo's put out money on this too. If you get this other money, is it going to revert to us, Director Mead, or will it revert to the city? Or
Chairman, Commissioner, so the city of Buffalo, when we did the engineer's estimate for this second construction package, it was estimated there might be up to a $1.2 million shortfall. So the city of Buffalo authorized out of their contingency funds, those funds available to complete this project so it gets finished regardless. The funds would not revert back to the Water Development Commission, but then would make their contingency funds a little more whole than what they are now because the funds are obligated to this project.
thank you. Okay, there's no other questions. If there's anything else, I guess there's no action today. It'll be tomorrow that we take the action. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll
Yeah,
be
I
back
would-
to you, Director Mead, unless you want, you want to add something?
Okay, so moving on to the next item, new funding applications and amendments. Again, just kind of wanting to give you guys the thought process we went through. I would direct you towards your regular e-notebook, not the recommendations e-notebook, but tab B as in boy under the regular e-notebook. And there you'll see basically the spreadsheets and recommendations and dollar totals and funding balance for different account 1, 2, and 3. And I'll kind of be talking those a little bit, but it'd be a good reference as I talk through this. So I'll give you just a minute to find that.
Everyone's set? Okay, go ahead. Give it
Okay.
1 minute.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead.
All right, so I'm going to talk about account one and account two together simultaneously, because as you recall in the past, we've transferred money from account one to account two to kind of budget or balance things as we have more demands in one account or the other. So when you look at account one balance available to spend, and that's up in the upper right-hand corner of each one of these spreadsheets. So the first spreadsheet's account one, the second spreadsheet's account two, and so on for account three. So the amount of available funding this year is roughly $56 to $57 million. And that's broken up into 39 million, roughly 500,000 in account one and 17 million in account two. As a comparison to last year, we had at the end of our recommendations in 2024 or for the 2024 session, we had roughly a little less than $13 million in account one and about $5.6 million in account two. And that was kind of what we typically do is we take our biennium available funds and we try to spend half one year and leave half for the next year. So that half that we had left over was that number, those numbers I just gave you, about 12.8 and 5.6. So then what happened, these balances are much bigger. So we talked in March, I believe, from what came out of the legislative session. And one of the things was a one-time, more or less, refund for the Board of Control funding coming out of our account one. Board of Control is all the hydrographers and folks that are regulating head gates throughout the state during the irrigation season and others. And so that biennium refund for 2 years was about $17 million. The other thing was, if you recall, we had ARPA replacement. So what came out of the legislative session was that the governor was given authority to more or less redistribute some of the ARPA funds that weren't used, water being one of the emphasis put on by the legislature on where to put that money. So we worked with the governor's office, came up with 8 projects that we felt like were going to meet the time requirements of ARPA and getting money obligated and spent by those certain dates that have those federal requirements. And so those 8 projects equated to about another 23.5 million, where they replaced water development funds that had been given to our sponsors or granted to our sponsors. So now instead of the sponsors of those projects having water development funds, they have ARPA money. So our accounts were more or less replenished for $23.5 million. So that also adds to their bigger than normal balances this year in account one and account two. And those 8 projects that we provided to the governor's office, there was roughly 13.5 million that went to account one project replacement and about 10 in account two. So, and then you take into account interest and repayments on loans and reversions of project money and different things like that. And that's how we get to our balances that I just mentioned, roughly 39 million, 40 million in account one and 17 million in account two. The one thing that did come out of that was, if you recall, there were some general funded projects in the construction bill last year that the Select Water Committee chose to try to fund with general funds. And by the time that got through the legislative session, the wording in the omnibus bill was changed to say, okay, you're not going to use general funds anymore. You're going to use some of that ARPA replacement dollar for dollar to fund those projects. So that sucked up, I guess, for lack of better words, some of that funding, that one-time funding that we got in the legislative session last year. So the point being, this is one-time funding. This isn't something we should expect every year. And we want to make sure that we are wise with how we spend that. And I'm going to tell you some things that we've been thinking about that we need to kind of look forward to. Okay, so for applications, in account one, we got 19 new applications. Actually, that was between account one and account two. And then we have 10 amendments that came in by September 1st for construction projects. We already knew what our planning studies were going to look like. We took applications back in March. We went through our May meeting and selected those. So when you add up the different construction projects for our new projects, we had about $47.5 million worth of new applications for new construction projects and about $10.5 million of amendments to existing construction projects. As a comparison, last year, we had roughly $46 million worth of requests between new and amendments So again, more than we saw last year. So kind of the way we look through that or thought about that is, one, is the project even eligible for our program? One project this year that you'll be seeing tomorrow, if you recall, West Afton, Neeld String, they were two kind of irrigation groups working together, got a master plan done, hopes that they could put together a district. I think Neeld String kind of fell out of that conversation. We'll hear more about that tomorrow. And they only came up with 933 acres, if I remember right. And our criteria says you have to have a minimum of 1,000 acres to be eligible for the water development program. So that's one thing we considered, and that'll be something that the commission and the Select Water Committee tomorrow will have to consider for that particular sponsor. The other kind of eligibility component is, a lot of times when we get projects in, they're a much larger project, that might include water treatment or water distribution lines when it comes to municipal type projects, where we in our program really just funds the water source and transmission lines, not necessarily distribution or water treatment plants and things like that. So we have to ferret out what portions of a project are actually eligible for our program and which ones aren't. And then we kind of tailor our recommendations accordingly. And then another thing we thought about is, this is one-time funding. There were several sponsors that asked for multiple projects or multiple projects within one application. And we want to make sure that we're distributing that funding as evenly as we can, or giving at least sponsors the ability to leverage that funding if they can. So just because you happen to, apply for several projects in one year, we didn't think that was necessarily fair to give that funding to just one sponsor. We should hold some over for next year. And that was part of our thought process as well. So with doing that, we also looked at, what did the sponsor currently have on the books? Are they getting, if they have a current construction project, are they making progress on it or not? Has it been languishing? And we really tried to keep it to, with the projects they may have already had for construction and this new application, the maximum would be 2 kind of current projects going at the same time with these new applications. And then there were projects that were pretty large. I'll probably mention this one again, but say the city of Rollins have had, some issues over the past year, and they had $20 million worth of requests or projects that came out of their master plan. And, we thought, well, our program's not going to be able to afford that. And I don't know if they can really bite off that big of, 4 or 5 projects all at once. So that was another thought, is probably need to phase some of these larger, more complex projects over time. And then another thing we've talked about, and then I should also mention, by phasing those types of projects, especially in irrigation projects, that helps us and the sponsor better leverage federal funding. Because a lot of times Water Smart is a federal program that our irrigation entities try to leverage, and that has a maximum 50% not to exceed $2 million worth of grant money. So if they have larger projects, it's beneficial for them to break them up into chunks so they can get $2 million on the first phase and $2 million on the second phase. And it doesn't help us a lot. It helps us in the fact that we can spread those projects out a little bit, but it helps them in the fact that they don't have as much money out of pocket, and they can leverage more federal funding the smaller they break up their projects. So another thing I wanted to talk about was pre-construction versus construction. We really started this kind of last year, maybe a little bit before last year, but pre-construction is design, bidding documents, access permits, easements, title opinions, everything you need up to the point where you're ready to bid a project out for construction. And as you know, we've had issues in the past where we have these projects from, 8 years ago, they're still asking for time extensions because they're waiting for easements, for example. So that's one of the questions we ask in our applications is, do you need easements? Do you need right-of-ways? And how difficult are those to get? Another thing we look at is, how complicated is the project and how long is it going to take to design the project? So there's some say municipal type projects that might be much more complicated and timely to design than putting a ditch into pipe, for example, where it's pretty straightforward. So that's another thing we considered. Also, we look at the timing of the project, and we think that that project will be ready to go construction before the next legislative session. Or would it be after the, say the 26th legislative session if we're looking at phasing it? 'Cause we don't want to hold up projects, but we don't necessarily want to put funding toward a project when it might take a couple years again to get easements and designs and everything into place, when that money could be spent on a more shovel-ready type project now. And then, so in general, we look at is all the access acquired, and they are at least to a 50% design when we decide that we're going to provide construction funding. Because we do get projects already, even where we've said, okay, well, we're going to give you pre-construction, come back when you're ready. And it's, we're expecting to have that last easement in just a couple months. And a couple months turns into 6 months, and it's still not, has been acquired. So we're thinking through all that stuff. And there will be projects tomorrow that you will hear that are do not fund. And I'm sure there will be, they're going to have their chance to provide information that they either provided us already. There's projects that we're still working with sponsors on to get as much information as we can to understand them, to give them the benefit of the doubt. So they'll have their chance tomorrow to talk to you folks and answer questions on that. But we do have a number of do not fund projects. The other thing is really the need versus the want, which we've talked about before. And one example of this is redundancy. We've got DEQ standards where we've got, some redundancy is fine, but excessive redundancy, which potentially turns into water age issues and things like that, we can't afford as a program, because of all the demands we have, to give everybody two of everything, kind of like we talked about when we were talking about that redundancy funding from the legislative session last year. So that's one thing we take into consideration. We also look at, the water rights, say an ag type project, that, they might want to size a pipe or something to take advantage of the Free River situation, but that Free River situation might only be giving them water for 5 or 6 days or something like that. And is that really, worth the dollars? And do we have that type of funding for everybody, or should we be sticking to, what they actually need? So not that they don't need Free River situation, but, it's a luxury, and you kind of got to think about all that stuff. Another example is a lot of times we will see water tanks for municipalities or districts of some sort. And we will price out what is the cheapest water tank to get to meet their needs. And a lot of times we'll see communities that say, well, we want a concrete tank because it's going to be less long-term operation and maintenance for us versus a welded steel tank. And we say, well, again, we can't afford to give everybody concrete tanks. So if you want to take multiple bids for alternative type tanks, that's fine. And we will pay for the lowest bid tank. And if you want to then upgrade to the concrete tank, you can pay the difference. So again, those are needs versus wants. So those are some of the things we think about. The next thing I would mention is last year was the first year we'd gone to 50% grants since I've worked here. So it'd probably been close to 20 years or more. Barry could tell us. He's been around forever. But anyway, so we'll be sticking with 50% grants again this year. The other thing that's a little bit different is we've had a number of sponsors ask for loans. And the majority of the time, I think, the situation is they've got federal funding that they're counting on, but the way the federal funding is going to work is that the project's got to get built before they can get reimbursed. So it's more or less they're asking for a loan to be able to cash flow the federal funding piece of it. And I see that as something that we should take advantage of this year and help them out. We've got kind of some unknowns going into the legislative session, and this will be a good way to help out our sponsors, yet get that money back fairly quickly. So I think we should do that this year, and we can talk more offline about that if you have questions. And then the last thing I think I would talk about would be time extensions. I mentioned we have 10 amendments. I can't remember exactly how many of those are time extensions, but it's a good number. I want to say 5 or 6. We are doing the pre-construction versus construction phasing type thing, but we still have, and we're going to continue to have those projects that were funded for construction 8 years ago or 7 years ago that we're still dealing with time extensions on. And that's going to take some time to play out before, this new way of doing things of wait until you're ready to go before we give you construction funding. It's going to take some time to work through that for the years that, it was funded the other way. So just a warning, you're going to see that again tomorrow. So again, I think the one more thing, and it's really related to the big balances we have, and this might be a message maybe to take to the legislative session, and that is because we're phasing pre-construction and construction, we're kind of setting up kind of a conceptual obligation in the future, right? If we give you design funds, you're going to expect at some point when you're done with that design and have all your easements in place that you can come back and get some construction dollars to actually construct the project. So we're putting something off, but anticipating it's going to be a demand on the program. So just from last year and this year, we've got probably $12 to $13 million worth of those projects that we would expect to come into the door here in the next year or two for construction funding. And then there's always those projects that we've talked about in the past that we've had to phase. I'll pick on Midvale, for example, the Wyoming Canal and relining that canal. We broke that up into 4 phases. We funded them for phase 1, I think last year or the year before. So we would expect at some point in the future, they're probably going to want to come back and get phase 2, 3, and 4. And there's municipal projects. I already mentioned Rollins. That's going to be another one. We know they have a lot of issues they're trying to deal with, and that's going to be a project that's going to come back to the trough, in the future. So again, it's one-time money. We don't want to blow it all at once. We want to be responsible with it. We need to think about the future and what obligations we're going to have in the future and the demands we're going to have in the future and try to do the best we can. So that's all I have to say about kind of the thought process for our recommendation tomorrow. If there are any questions.
Thank you for all that, Director Mead. Any questions?
Madam Chair.
Vice Chair?
Director Mead, I don't know if it's appropriate or not. Is this the place to discuss any individual projects, or do we want to wait till tomorrow, or?
I'd prefer to wait till tomorrow just because the sponsors are here to address questions. If you've got something that's fairly simple or.
Well, this wouldn't be a question for the sponsor, it'd be more of a question for you.
Okay.
And maybe for the group. Became aware of this West Afton Neil String acreage limitation, 1,000-acre limitation, I believe. I did a little research into that and found the language on that. And the question I have is that is that part of the working criteria? How concrete is that? Has there ever been opportunity for a variance to anything like that?
So it's in our operating criteria. Criteria are not rules. They're, to help guide our program. There can be exceptions to criteria, and that's up to the commission, I think, to consider. I don't recall if we've ever had another sponsor that has come in under 1,000. At one point in time, I think it was 2,000 acres under a previous commission, probably a decade ago, and they decided to change it to 1,000 at one point. And I don't know if there was any real firm thought behind how they came up with 1,000, but it was changed at one point in time. And, I would say there's always exceptions to the rules, but we also have to consider, the funding we have and all that. So I guess that's what I can respond with on that question.
Okay, thank you, Director.
But you have the flexibility to do what you want.
Okay, great. Thanks, Director. And then we'll go ahead and let you continue.
Okay, the only other thing I'd mention, this is a little bit separate from the subject that we were just talking about, is normally when we get done with planning studies, we will do project closeouts and say, here's how much money we spent on the study, a little synopsis of the study and the, when the final presentation was and all that stuff. We had a number of studies, Casper Alcova Irrigation District Master Plan, the Goshen Irrigation District Master Plan, the Sidon Irrigation District Master Plan, and then there was the Willwood Rehab Level 2 study. Those are just getting wrapped up. We're still waiting for final deliverables and final invoices on those. So it's going to be slightly out of order because they've already actually applied for level 3 funding, and you'll hear those tomorrow. So you'll hear in December the actual study closeout. So just it'll be a little, we've had 1 or 2 of those in the past, and I just wanted to point that out. So with that, the rest of the day will really be providing you guys updates. So the first one's going to be on the Goshen Irrigation District Tunnels project and how things are progressing on that. So I would invite Kevin Strecker and whoever else he wants to bring on up to come on up.
Welcome, Kevin. You'd all just introduce yourselves. When you get a chance, when you get seated and everything. Thank you. How are you doing?
Thanks.
Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm Kevin Strecker, General Manager for Goshen Irrigation District, and have with me Sean Booth, our Board of Directors President, and Marcus Kroll from our engineering firm, HDR. Thank you for this opportunity to give you an update here. I know it's been about a year since most of you have probably heard from us. We happy to say just yesterday, our engineering team just submitted the 60% design. So we're complete with that now, which really is a big milestone because a lot of things hinge on that for Wyoming Water Development Office to do a lot of their work. Also for our, back in February, we procured a CMAR construction manager at risk. We hired Atkinson Construction out of Texas to be our CMAR and work with HDR and us to get to a guaranteed maximum price and ultimately oversee this construction of this project. So they've been working all this year here with us since February to value engineer this to find the best cost, best method of delivery for this project. We've went through a lot of work here in the past 6 months, coming up with value engineering, and we started out, of course, on this project, deciding that the sequential excavation method would be the best method for this, the least amount of disturbance, easiest to permit. Going through that with the CMAR and our engineering team, getting rough cost estimates of that, it came back to around 134 million, 135 million. So we're, once again, sitting there, well, we're nowhere near that. So, kind of back to the value engineering board. So we looked at another number of different options, doing a tunnel boring system offline and just building a brand new, bigger tunnel offline. That came in at a roughly 147 million. So getting worse instead of better. So then we went back again. We've been considering this option for a long time. It's been brought up, the last couple of years that we've been working on this. Do a smaller tunnel offline and reline our old tunnels. Just leave the liner that's in place, reline the old tunnels with new concrete, new supported concrete. Unfortunately, that came in at around 105 million. So in this process, well, with all the permitting problems that may arise, we're still thinking we still want to stay on alignment. So we came up with, working with the CMAR, of instead of the traditional SEM method, what they'll do is they'll use a kind of more typical boring machine that they use in tunneling and retrofit it with different tools like excavation tools type tools, and where they could dig out the old tunnel but be protected by a shield. We call it a digger shield, so that you don't have the risk of the tunnel collapsing, to eliminate any of that risk while you're taking the old material out. Right now, those estimates are around 87 million for that. So that has been the cheapest option that we've come up with. And this is for both tunnels, by the way. So this would be for the total project. So that's kind of the direction we've been going on. That's what the 60% design then has been driven by, that method of delivery. So we've been doing a lot of work with the CMAR, which is one of the benefits of having a CMAR is they've been able to go out and talk to manufacturing companies of these boring machines, get an idea of cost, lead times. What they would do is when they bore the old tunnels out, they will then line that tunnel behind them with precasted cement segments. I think there's kind of a picture of that on the back page on the flip side of the handout there. And so we have this kind of project, we have a lot of long lead times. We have site access, that'll take some time, power requirements, just ordering transformers alone to run a machine like this, you're looking at a year lead time for transformers is what we're hearing. So the concrete liner, you're looking at close to a year lead time to have those made and on site, so they're ready to go. The machine itself is probably a year out. So which is one of the reasons that drove us to getting a CMAR, so that we could start on this now, getting some of these things procured and ordered and get that process started. In the meantime, we've help me if I'm wrong, Marcus, but our EA draft has been submitted. So that is now in review with the Bureau of Reclamation and the other agencies that have to review that. We're expected that to be completed in March. So there's of course, public comment period of, I think it's 60 days. Is that correct? So that'll be done in March. Some of the things that have been thrown at us, Fish and Wildlife came to us and said we had to do a bat survey to make sure that the tricolored bat was not in the area that they're anticipating being put on the endangered species list. It's not on there yet, but since there are bats in the area, we had to do this study. We got that completed in September, and luckily there were no bats found, and let alone a tricolored one, which cut our costs tremendously. That we were looking at about $150,000 cost just to do those surveys and a 2-month time period. So that cut that down to less than a month and a cost of around $40,000. So that was some good news. We had to do some lab testing on the old cement liner, because if there's asbestos in it, you got to have a whole disposal plant. So that's been completed. There's no asbestos. So that freed up a lot of risk on that end. We're now, in fact, in the next week or two, we should have all the testing back of the old timbers behind the liner that they used to frame up the tunnels when they built them originally, make sure there's no creosote or any toxic chemicals in that wood. The first testing has come back negative, so I think we're going to be fine there. That's just an example of some of the hurdles we've had to go through here in this last year. Right of ways, we're almost secure in our right of ways. The only holdup is one private landowner, their sign off got held up because there was a death in their family, and they couldn't sign anything because it was stuck in a trust. So, but that is almost completed. They've agreed with it in principle. We have no problems there. It's just they had to wait for the legalities to go through. So we're looking right now, timeline wise, fall of 26, or fall of 25, getting the portals ready to launch this machine. That work will go between fall of 25, spring of 26. Then in the fall of 26, we could actually launch the digger machine at Tunnel 2, do Tunnel 2 through the 26-27 off season. That would be complete, have a brand new tunnel for the 27 irrigation season. And then in the 27-28 season, launch and do Tunnel 1. So it'd be right now timeline fully completed by the spring of 28 with 2 new tunnels. Yeah.
Hello, my name's Sean Booth. Currently, I'm president of Goshen Irrigation. And just kind of do a little bit of rewind. I've been on the board now, I believe 14 years. I was secretary treasurer when this collapse happened. And obviously, the first thing we had to do was raise assessments instantly. They went up $5 an acre. And more than anything, just knowing in advance, it's going to take a tremendous amount of money, whatever we do, to get this repaired. There's still a lot of worry amongst landowners right now, how high these assessments could possibly go. They're very scared of if we start jumping up 15, 20, $50 an acre, things like that. So we're going to do everything we can, Kevin and I and the board, on securing funding anywhere we can get it. And I would like to thank Water Development. Jason, you've done the projects that we've done over all these years has been phenomenal. You should see the system. It's one of the most state-of-the-art systems in the state, if not in the country, when you travel to 4-state tours and whatnot. So I'm very proud of every dollar that we have gotten. We've put it to good use and made good, smart water decisions. So when you talk funding, it's so encompassing that you were talking about master plan a minute ago. We're just about to get ours. And for example, the #1 priority master plan beyond the tunnels for Goshen Irrigation District is the Wayland Dam, and just estimated another 100 million to repair it. That's just, that part of it is just as old as the tunnel. So, but it's such a tremendous amount of land that it's irrigating and a lot of water that's being used. So it's hard to put a value. We've had people coming out, well, what's the water worth, you know, and well, even when the failure happened, what's the water worth? And roughly at that year, it was $10 million a week is what it was worth, ballpark, between Goshen Irrigation and Gearing Fort Laramie. So, you know, and we were off close to 8 weeks. So we theoretically took, but the big thing is if you didn't have the water, what would you have? And it would be basically, this is high desert country. This year, we'd have had absolutely nothing because we never got any rain. So I thank the Water Development for all the years of funding these projects. It's beyond, it's just beyond belief how much good we've done with it. On the funding end of it, we've secured a certain amount of funding. With this 60% design that we should be getting shortly, you know, we should have a number. That's the whole reason having a CMAR, know what the number is, so you can go out and find the funding. And so that was one of the big reasons why we went that direction. Besides needing the help of the design, I realized once we changed the method from a SEM to a digger shield, that pushed our timetable back, which is probably a reason, for example, we didn't ask for an amendment this session towards the tunnels. There's no reason to amend something that you don't know what you need. We're not going to come to you with just a number and, you know, out of the dark. So it's important that we get that information before we start asking. And so Gearing Fort Laramie has gotten $23.1 million put together from ARPA fund. That's time sensitive money. That's money that's got to be used up by October of 26. So our plan is just to let you know, we're going to probably use their money first. It's time sensitive. We got to get, once we get this project going and we're under construction, that's where we're going to be using the money up first. And then, of course, the grant that we've got through the state of 21.8. What's the number going to be? I mean, we're thinking 80 to 90. And once we know, I'm sure most all of you will know. And that was even the point I made to the governor last week when he was at the office. You know, I said, we're not gonna, there's nothing for us to come to you with for an ask at this point, but there's gonna be a big ask someday because once we do know where we're at and we have really good costs on this construction, and it's so hard for these engineering companies to cost risk. What is the risk of failure? What is the risk of another collapse? What is the risk of death? What is the risk of all these things? So these are all things that, you know, when you're asking them to give you a number, it's all got to be considered. The digger shield, the process we're going on that end of it, it's got to be built and bought before we can start. And until we know what the design is, what the size is, it's an absolute phenomenal way of doing it because you're pre-constructing a tunnel behind the shield, so you're in a secure spot all the time. So, so we've gotten those two places of funding. We've also applied, obviously, and been accepted for a Bureau of Reclamation XM loan of $53.4 million. That's 100% payback. And this is the big hurdle. Kevin and I went back to Washington, DC a year ago last October. We visited with all the legislators, senators, everybody, Pete Ricketts, Deb Fisher, everybody, obviously all of our group, John and all. And we hope that our relationship with John Barrasso is going to possibly pay big dividends with the election the way it happened. Because if he still is, and I don't know if he will be, the chairman of the Natural Resources Committee, and the Bureau of Reclamation works underneath that committee. So the possibility of possibly getting some of this huge loan forgiven will be one of our first asks. And we did go back with Gearing Fort Laramie. We went back both districts, both members of the board and the managers. And we circled the wagons and made some connections. So as far as on the money end, I mean, that's where we're at as today. And the backside, of course, has a good estimated schedule of what we're hoping to get this accomplished. But all I can say is, you know, we're and sometimes it kind of makes you kind of think that you're standing still and you're not progressing. And you have landowners wondering what the heck's going on, what's taking so long. This did happen in 2019. It takes a long time to gather yourself up and get to where you can run water is the first thing. And we secured that SLIB loan immediately. And the state helped us with it, $4 million. The $1 million we had to pay back has been paid back. We got that loan paid off. So we are working on our budget, which is tough. Because this is a 85 million or 85 mile long district and a lot of turnout. So anyway, one thing about that XM loan, they have a directives and standards. I think once you get above $12 million, you have to go through their directives and standards, their engineering, and that is extremely complicated, long, expensive. There's a lot of things that are involved with that. And we probably don't know the end of that, but we will when this gets over and done with. So I'll let Kevin, if you got anything else we need to cover.
Yeah.
Thank you.
If I may, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was kind of elaborate on the XM loan funding a little more. Yeah, that does kick us up to having to go through Reclamation's directive and standards. In June, we went through their value planning study, and that basically kind of just goes through all of our value engineering that we've already done, how we got to where we're at. And they we came out of, that's kind of where we were first discussing the digger shield. They're very happy with the method that we've come up with, where we're at with all that, with the engineering side of it and our method of delivery. They agree that's probably the best method for this project, and agreed with how we got there. That was a week-long meeting in Denver. And right now, we're currently at the 60% design level. They do what they call a deck review, design, engineering, and construction review. That is looking to take about at least 3 months probably. They came and toured our site, toured the tunnels. They will use now the 60% design, go through that, go through all the cost estimates, make sure that everything's looking on the up and up, and that they agree with everything. Like I say, that's probably about a 2 to 3 month process. Kind of the problems of getting this federal money is, there's these strings attached, and it also costs us money. Right now, we're at about, well, just for this deck review, we're looking at it, we've already written them a check for $225,000. So, and so these are kind of some of the things, the BAT survey, the stuff like that have come out of our pockets, that we've helped, that we've put into this. So that's why we're looking for any relief we can anywhere else to help offset some of these costs in the construction part. We did like Sean said, we went back to DC last fall. Out of that, we've hired an advocate to help us with some of those negotiations and talking with our delegates, since we can't be there all the time. We did jointly apply, well, on the Nebraska side and the Wyoming side, for an appropriations bill to get $1.5 million each to help with these tunnels. We were denied that. Their reasoning being that since we were awarded this XM loan, that they consider this just standard operation and maintenance, and they don't fund that kind of things through the appropriations, which is kind of upsetting, because to us, this is way beyond operation and maintenance. But so we are still looking at some other federal funding. We applied this spring, early summer, for NRCS PL 566 grant. That is under review right now. I don't know the status of it yet. That was a, I believe it, yeah, $25 million application. So we'll see where that's at. We are also going to apply for another NRCS program. It's called the RCPP, Regional Conservation Partnership Program. We've been told we could be eligible for that, so we're working with our local NRCS. We've just talked about that. We haven't applied yet, so that'll be underway. So we'll see if any of these may come to fruition. That would be great, especially where those are grant dollars. Of course, it's timely, but we're, this is a multi-year project. It could still work out and really help us out. So we are diligently pursuing other funding options. Also, with that deck review with the Bureau of Reclamation, we cannot utilize any of those loan funds until the deck review is completed. So, these are just some of the holdups we're looking at, but, if everything goes well, we're looking at completion of that by this spring or summer, so.
Thank you, Director.
Just one comment. So one of the questions that the district asked, and I applaud them for all their efforts to find additional funding, was could they do early work packages? And we had that discussion, and this applies to probably not only GID, but also eventually La Prairie Irrigation District. But my initial thought on that was, where we're potentially spending state dollars and then we don't have a fully funded project, I don't want to end up with, like, for example, one of the early work packages would have been staging areas, roads, geotechnical stabilization around portals eventually probably go beyond the early work package, but something before the tunnels get fixed. And my initial thoughts were, if you don't have a fully funded project, then it's probably not good business for the state of Wyoming to be spending state dollars when you don't know that you're ever going to finish the project. So that would all be for nothing potentially. Not that it's an option to not fix these projects, but when all the funds aren't there, how should we be looking at that? The fact that they've acquired their XM loan sets my mind at ease because they have a plan B and are willing to take on that obligation. But I would like to have, I guess, other folks' thoughts on that. If they disagree or think we should be doing early work packages, regardless of if all the funds are in place or not. But it concerned me. I'm not as concerned now because like I mentioned, they've got their loan at least once they get through their deck review. Because there is no guarantee that the state of Wyoming will be able to eventually be able to fund any shortfalls. And I wouldn't want to, I guess, waste money if the project can't eventually be completed. Anybody disagree with that kind of thought process? Or have comments or feedback for me? Be all ears.
I see, Chairman Steinmetz.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Well, it's been a long time coming, guys, when we stood on the ditch bank and looked at the damage and then had our pizza party, at least when we got water running again. But you know, first of all, what is your interest rate on the XM loan?
Yeah, Madam
David?
Chair, Sherry, we don't know for sure yet. They are trying to tie it into, we were granted a $3.5 million for any design work that we can use, which is a loan also. And that loan is at 1.8%. So they're trying to tie this loan into that same interest rate. I don't have confirmation of that yet, but that is what they are working on. If we cannot do that, it would be over 5% right now. So significant difference. So.
Okay. And then follow up, Madam
Follow-up?
Chairman? All right. So, I mean, but either way, you're committed to moving forward if you have to go the loan or if we can find you some further funding. So doing the pre-packaged work wouldn't be a problem because we have to have water and we know we're still
That's
in an
gonna happen.
emergency state. I mean, it could cave in at any minute. And we're talking almost a 10-year time frame of how long it's taken us to get this far. So,
Yeah, Madam Chair, that's exactly right. And how we lost our emergency status, I'll never know. Putting the ribs in the tunnel to keep and to let you know, the ribs are bearing weight. It is holding the tunnel up now. That is what's holding the tunnel in place. So that it was more a safety factor. Now it is actually holding the tunnel up. But yeah, as far as, securing this money, I think, and securing that the project's gonna happen, it's gonna happen one way or another. We're doing everything we can to get it completed and try to get it as much funded without coming at commodity prices commodity prices can't withstand these kind of numbers. No way. And so we've got to do everything we can, and we'll do everything we can to get funding wherever we can. But rest assured, Jason, I mean, a project like this, we're not going to consider doing one tunnel and not both of them. They're both at risk. We're completely at risk, and they have to be rebuilt and stand on their own and actually run full water supply. We're running at a very, we put the ribs in and then we sheeted those ribs so that, because it had a turbulent effect, like a toilet, wash tub, whatever you want to call it. The water was just, it was circulating in those tunnels. It was so violent that couldn't get it to flow through. And so we sheeted them and even made a lot of difference coming back to the walls on the front side of the shielding and then on the back side, both, so the water could, and it increased the 150 CFS. I mean, it was remarkable how much we get through it. Just to mention on the CMAR deal, we did a lot of work on that. We held interviews. Peter Kiewit, SAK, Atkinson, we had we had a tour. We had 7 engineering companies participate. We had 3 of them offer bids and help on this. And it took a lot of work on both board of directors to secure a CMAR contract, or I should say, engineering company to help us with this project, because the design build, whether it's water development's funding, our funding, it's hard to know what you need until you get the bid. And we're so far, when you can't hardly bid it out. Those folks all came with different solutions for the project. There was a number of different solutions. A lot of them where they got kicked out simply because easement, the permitting process was going to take 10 to 20 years. There's no way we can do that. I mean, we'd have done an open cut if we'd obviously do an open cut, but we're above, we're underneath, I should say, BLM ground. And it took us, we had to dig 2 4-inch holes for a survey, geotechnical survey, to go down to the tunnels. And it was on BLM land. And I don't know how many months that it took. It took almost a year. They finally let us dig 2 holes that big around. And if you think there's ways of projects to get held up, there's lots of ways for projects to get, and it's unbelievable. But Atkinson, originally their proposal was to take the floor out, leave the roof in, possibly widen the walls. Well, once you do the hydrological, the hydraulics of the water, we lost our freeboard. In the 85 miles that this canal runs, there's 18.5-foot fall. Of the 18.5-foot fall, 6 foot of it is in those 2 tunnels. So in the early 1900s, to make up for volume with speed, and to make the tunnels where they would stand. Anyway, Atkinson actually, their design, once we got to it, didn't work. We lost freeboard, we lost fall, we lost volume. So that's why this digger shield, that thing will set right on the bottom of the tunnel floor. It is going to be nothing but than a big drill bit, taking out concrete, dirt, timber, concrete, dirt, timber. You're going to have to grout the 5 o'clock, 7 o'clock, and then that's all new concrete chunks put together. So if you picture that in your mind, and it's a safe and secure way of doing it, I think this is our plan, and I can't wait to find out what our 60% numbers are, but got a lot of challenges. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Booth. Any questions from the commission or select water members?
No, Madam Chair.
Yes,
I have some questions. I think we've probably been over this before, but maybe some updates. You talked about raising your assessments. What's your assessment now?
We're currently at, they put me on the spot.
I think currently we're at 32.5.
32.5.
And then $250 per account. So that's where we're at. Like Gearing, Fort Laramie is at 36, I believe. We're gonna have to go up. I mean, this is well beyond O&M, obviously. We have O&M on all the head gates checks. Another thing, that John and others would know, there's quite a few siphons in this system where the county roads go over the top of the canal. And so needless to say, everything every winter is being looked at for any possible failure, because you just can't have another one of these. But that's kind of where we're at. And we are occasionally, I should say, probably annually going to raise it $1 a year. But once we have a number and we have a loan and we don't have grants, it could go up substantially. That XM loan is a 30-year loan. So we do have time, but do the math. And I think Ray did the math at $10 an acre for 30 years.
So follow up, how many acres are served by the entire project?
In our district, We have
52,484.
which is 49% of the total acres.
I need to get this straight in my mind. I know there are more than, there's the Nebraska irrigators involved. And so that doesn't include their acres. The
No.
52,000.
No, that's,
So from,
but we share in the cost. They pay 51% of these tunnels. They
okay,
will.
so from start to finish of from the first turnout on the canals
Yeah.
to the end, before and after the tunnels, how many, approximately how many total acres, irrigated acres served?
Total acres, with both districts is around 105,
110,000.
110,000 acres. Yeah. That goes down in the Gearing Valley then through Lima, Nebraska. You know, it covers 164 miles, 165 miles is the total length of the canal.
And then to follow up on those assessments, do you have an idea about what percentage of that $32, I think you said, is the O and M portion? You've raised your fees, your assessments, and I assume somewhat to maybe help with some of these preliminary costs and so on of this project. But what percentage is it? 75%, 90% of your assessment is just O and M for your district?
Yeah, Madam Chair, yeah, right now we're at, it would be $28 for our just regular assessment. And then we are still taking $5 and that's set aside just for the tunnel. So, that's where we're at currently. So, and then the $250 account fee for each, if you want to call it a first acre fee, whatever, that is also just for O and M.
I don't think, we did not raise assessments this last year. I don't think we did.
Before we did.
The year before we have. But basically that raise is basically O and M, employees, machinery, head gates, all the things that it takes to run a district this size. So the $5 and that's how we paid off the slip board, the loan that we'd gotten from them in the emergency, the $1 million we'd had at that time. I think we had $500,000 accumulated and 2 more fiscal years of income and we paid off the loan and move on because that was the emergency repair, to get it dug out and get the ribs in and everything. So how much more we're going to have to raise just for the tunnels, we don't know. But I can tell you, like when we go back to DC, the tunnels are part of the project. It's part of the system, but the system upgrades that are needed down there are, talking with Gearing Fort Laramie, and I tried to convince those folks that went with this, you're thinking too small. Because if Wayland, for example, they have one tunnel, but they have multiple siphons too, that this water flows through. This is aging infrastructure, and this is what upset Deb Fisher so much when we spoke with her, because she caught a lot of heat voting for the infrastructure bill, and then it isn't used for infrastructure. And it just made her blood boil that we couldn't get access to that money that was specifically this, earmarked for highways, tunnels, bridges, all the infrastructure, whether it's water or rail or highways. But the main thing that we need when we go back there is Wayland Dam. I mean, there's millions of dollars that's going to be required in the next 10 to 20 years. We're patching Wayland annually. That water's eroding that concrete out. It's taken a tremendous, that's a 100-year-old structure. It's been automated and everything, but it still is going to require engineering and a completely rebuild. So, that's what, when we're doing it, this is part of a big picture, to answer your question.
Can you clarify, Wayland Dam, is that a diversion dam?
Yeah, that's on the North Platte, and that's where Pathfinder irrigation, the Pathfinder irrigation system is on the north side, and we're on the south side, and then the river goes between us, and we divert off both sides. We used to share the dam, and now we O&M each one of ours separately. And then we share the cost of the actual structure in the middle of the river that holds the water back. And then we divert. So it's our side that we had, of course, I think it was Heritage. Or Western Heritage, did our master plan for water development. And, they showed that as our number one priority that needs to be fixed. So it's a big one.
Any more?
No, thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Sukur, I think you had a question?
Yeah, I did. I had just kind of a clarification that I was gonna ask. Supposing the tunnel is 88 million. And what is your anticipated return on investment based on those costs? Now, with that, I'll say that you mentioned, I believe, that it was a $10 million a week loss if you didn't have that. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. That's when that failed in 2019. SAK wanted us to start, and what did it cost? And this is all 110,000 acres that this involves. What is the cost of not having water in that system for 1 week? And just the rough numbers they came up with, that was the number they had at that time.
Did that include Nebraska?
Yes,
So that's total.
yes,
Wherever it went, how it got there.
everyone affected. Yes.
Okay, well, that clarifies mine because I just wondered if there was an additional cost if you added them to the criteria.
Well, the only thing that could have been worse is if it happened this year. Because without irrigation water, we virtually had nothing down there. It took, we got our biggest rain of the year. Last week, we got 7/10. And so I'm almost to 4 inches on our place
I
on the
think
year.
you can relate that all the way on the eastern part of the state because
Yeah.
we didn't get any either.
Oh, is that right?
Never got any
We've
rain.
been real poor on rain lately.
Since the 4th of July. So
Yeah,
I know what that's like. Okay, well, that answers my question. Thank you.
you bet.
Thank you. I think Speaker Summers, did you have a question? No, okay. I'll go ahead with Chairman Steinmetz and then with Commissioner Glick. Chairman?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just one more question. I wanted to get us back to Wayland Dam because that's a pretty big deal. So is Pathfinder half of that? Do they share in half the cost of that? And then could you just remind everybody how many CFS of water we're talking about? Because these canals are not small canals, they're giant, enormous canals. And so just for perspective for everyone.
Yeah, Madam Chair, Senator Steinmetz, first of all, on the Pathfinder question, the diversion dam itself would be shared by, Gearing, Fort Laramie, Goshen Irrigation, and Pathfinder Irrigation Districts. So there's 3 entities involved in the dam itself. Pathfinder Irrigation is responsible for their diversion gates and those structures that go north of the river. And we're responsible for our gates and diversion or structure that goes south. So when we say Wayland Dam, there's kind of 2 components: the dam itself, which is a whole animal in itself, and then also our gates and outlet portal, or whatever you want to call it. So you could have easily 100 million wrapped up in the dam itself, and then 100 million in just if you will completely rebuild our gates and outflow works at the dam itself. So it would be a huge project. And just kind of unrelated, but I've been talking a lot with Wirelick, our local power agency, and some other and talking a little bit federally about if we do redo that, can we integrate hydropower with that to help defer some of these costs, get back revenue. And so that's been a lot of the talks. Actually, the last few months I've been working with Wirelick on that about feasibility studies and what we can maybe apply for there. So there is some good maybe at the end of that to help with costs and revenue in the future if and when we have to redo that. So So I think hydropower could be a good way to offset some of those costs. And there's a lot of grant money in that also, so.
What was your other question?
Oh, and then CFS, yeah, sorry. Historically, we're allowed a foot, not to exceed a foot to the 70 per acre. That is 1553 CFS at our diversion. So currently with our restrictions in the tunnels, we're between 1375 and 1400 CFS, but we can divert 1550 at the diversion, so.
Thank you.
Yeah, Pathfinder, they've been down in recent years for whatever reason, but I think they're capable of about 2100 CFS, around 2000.
Thank
We
you, Kevin.
can tell you with the new tunnels, Sherry, that we're making sure the diameter, the size of these tunnels are not only carrying our water right, but a flood control event too. So it'll be big. I don't know exactly the diameter dimensions, but it'll be able to carry much more than our water right. So, okay.
Thank you. Commissioner Glick.
Who declared the emergency and how did they take your emergency declaration away?
Yeah, I think, Madam Chairman, Commissioner Glick, I believe we're established an emergency. I don't know if I know the Bureau of Reclamation declared it an emergency, and we got some, we received some FEMA money as well. And so I think with both of those, I think it's, more than one agency that declared it an emergency, but after we did the repairs, then the Bureau did not consider it an emergency anymore. And I don't know because this was kind of before my capacity as manager, but I don't know that I've ever seen anything official where they said you're no longer an emergency, but we've just known that in applying for other things that they said we're not, because we tried to apply for the emergency extraordinary measure, extraordinary maintenance through the Bureau of Reclamation, and we were told we could not qualify for that because we were not an emergency anymore. So.
Is there a way to go back and request emergency declaration if you could kind of prove that it's not feasible right now?
Yeah.
I think once we're as a functioning district, at delivering water, I think that's part of how we lost our status, and that was an emphasis Kevin and I went back to DC with it. We told all those legislators, this is still an emergency. We're still at high risk, or we're certainly at a lot of risk of another failure before this thing is permanently repaired. And, but I think that's how we lost our status, is just because we could run, the majority of our water right through it, that we no longer were declared an emergency, and which that doesn't help. I mean, sometimes you get more action. And so we try to be pretty noisy. We try to make a lot of wherever we can, newspapers, televisions, whatever, farm networks, about our situation, because there are other irrigation districts, water strategies that we hire in DC. He's our lobbyist. He sets up our meetings with the legislators and stuff. And Chris will tell you, the districts all over the Western United States, it's a matter of, if you want to be effective, you got to just stay with it, keep with it. Don't quit, don't give up, continue to work on getting grants put together, because the system, it's old and it's expensive, and the farmers couldn't afford to repair it, no way. But I think that's how we lost our status, I think.
It'd be nice to have the documentation showing that they took the emergency status or removed it. Then see how you can move from then on. Might be a good thing to do.
It could be helpful.
Thank you.
Commissioner Cott.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Jason, just to restate your original question there that you posed to the board. Was there a question? It was like, yeah, if you could restate that.
I probably stated it as a question. I just really wanted some open discussion on the idea of really the early work packages before a project was fully funded. And in this case, I think they've got, like I said, a plan B. They're going to work on everything they can to obviously get more grant dollars to make this more affordable for them, but they do have that backup, or will have, I guess, after the deck review is done, that XM loan to fully fund the project. So just in general, the concept of if that weren't the case, should we be funding early work packages, not knowing if the project was going to be fully funded? So I didn't hear a lot of conversation. I'm assuming that means you. somewhat
I
agree
would
with the
just
thought,
like to
but-
take a stab at that question. And to me, it's a matter of risk, I mean, and scale. Sounds like there's a lot of scale here and a lot of economic risk if we don't do something. So, I mean, what's the risk of this not being funded? I guess this is a question to the group. Do you feel good that the funds will be there? I mean.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Cott.
Kevin?
Yeah, as far as, you know, with this XM loan, we would be funded up to 98,300,000. So that would cover what we're looking at right now. And, you know, it's not our ideal funding, but it would cover it, and we would do that if we have to. Now, I'm very confident that the XM loan will come through, that there'll be no problems. It's just a matter of when. You know, the deck review could take 3 months, maybe 6 months. It just depends on how fast they get done with that.
Hey, Madam Chair, just one follow-up on that. And so I would be supportive of, you know, funding some engineering packages ahead of the funding being in place. I mean, of course, if the Water Development Office didn't feel that was a good risk, I mean, we'd probably back off of that, but it sounds like there's a lot of investment, a lot of momentum. And for this not to go through would be, I mean, an economic tragedy. So I guess I would be supportive of funding some portions before. I know it's a risk. Everything's a risk. So that's my statement.
Commissioner Suker?
Madam Chairman, I just had a follow-up for Jason. Are any of those funds refundable that state allocates towards this project? Or could they be?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Suker, can you restate that? Refundable as in they'd have to pay them back?
Yeah,
Refundable to the
that
state?
if they had the money allocated and there was enough funding, could the state get money back for those funds that we have already expended?
Well, there's language in our criteria that gets to if a project is not completed, and I'll say for no good reason, it's stated much more eloquently like in our criteria, but then the commission has the ability to ask for repayment or payback of funds spent.
Right, but if they are truly funded, can we get the money that we allocated? If they find their funding, build a project, can we get federal funds to reimburse us for what we've expended? That's my question.
I have not come across any federal funding programs that would say, state of Wyoming, you've spent $5 million
Right.
2 years ago, we'll pay you back for that. I think it's usually moving forward. The federal funds, if I'm understanding your question right.
That's
If
right.
you just want to replace, let's say they go into the NRCS PL 566 program and have great success with that, and they don't need the $21 million or plus $1 million that was set aside in 2022 by the state legislature, then, you know, maybe they would want to use Fed money instead of state money. There's that circumstance too.
Okay.
I don't know that would necessarily work out. I think that goes up to 75%, but it's only 25 million. So that probably wouldn't be the case.
Okay, thank you. I had a follow-up from the sponsor. did you guys, or did your district participate in our infrastructure study that we done some time ago?
Yeah, Madam Chair, Commissioner Schuker. Yes, we did. And I'm happy to say we are, I think, 10 of the top 30 of at-risk structures. So, yeah, just mostly because we are a very large system and everything in the system is over 100 years old. But yeah, we were involved in that and helped the engineers with what we could with that study. So
Was that prior to your failure? I don't remember. I don't recall. It was after, right?
yes, yeah, yeah.
That we
In fact,
allocated that
I think
study.
they did a presentation at Wyoming Water Association. So they've kind of concluded that first phase. So yeah,
So your tunnel never got in there. It
they
was
did
already-
not.
It already had a problem.
Yeah, I think if I remember right, they did list the tunnel, but they didn't, but we have several other structures that are listed in that study, so, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm gonna go ahead to Commissioner Summers and I'll come back to you. I mean, to. Summers,
Madam
sorry.
Chairman, thank you. I was just curious on the 86 million, is there a contingency built into that estimate or is that, would there be a contingency that would have to be placed on top of that estimate?
Yeah, Madam Chair, I think, if it's all right, I'll defer to our engineer on that question.
Marcus?
Madam Chair, I think the short answer is yes. So that's the estimated guaranteed maximum price from the CMAR. So we would work with the CMAR and the office to apply an appropriate contingency.
Thank you, Marcus. Commissioner Glick?
You said, your CFS from the diversion was what, 1553, right? And that's how many acre feet do you actually get within your district throughout the irrigation season?
Right now, Madam Chairman, Commissioner Glick, we average anywhere between 1.5 to close to 2 acre feet throughout the season of delivered water. So our diversion, it's kind of misleading. A foot to the 70 equals that 1550 CFS at the diversion point. We cannot deliver that much water, of course, to the farm because of losses and you know, all the other things that goes on through a system that big. So we actually only deliver a foot to 100 is when we're up and running and everyone's using, we're at 1 CFS per 100 acres.
Okay, I guess what I'm trying to say is that diversion has 1553, you say, and then what's the water right that's at that diversion? How many acre feet do you get for your water rights? That's what I'm trying to ask.
We had in our contract, our bureau contract says not to exceed a foot to the 70. So it's a little
Kind of confusing.
It's a little strange then when
Yeah.
you go from acre feet to CFS too, it gets kind of confusing, but as far as water delivered throughout the year, we deliver acre feet between 1.5 and say 1.8 acre feet a year.
And
That's total
what-
used.
And that's per acre or is that
Yeah.
per,
Yeah.
or is it, what is it, 1 per 70?
Yeah, if you figure 110,000 acres through the system and they were all, and you were putting that water on every acre, that's what the 1553 would cover.
Okay, and then
Would be a
so
foot to the 70.
if you guys aren't using that water, who utilizes your guys' water water rights, I guess?
Yeah, like right now, say, you know, because of the tunnels, we're not using what we would have used this year. That basically just stays in the pool for all the 13 districts to divide up. Unless we're on an allocation, there is no real limit. So it's kind of whatever your system can handle. And we can run water anywhere from May 1st to October 1st. So if there's no allocation anytime in that year, whatever the district can handle and what they can take, they can use that much. So if we don't use it, it's either still in the reservoirs or another irrigation district is benefiting from it.
So there's no way to recoup that.
Not really, yeah,
Does it?
it's either, still in the reservoir
Wyoming
because
water
we
law
didn't use it,
availability?
or someone
Yeah.
else gets that benefit, yeah.
Also to answer your question, as far as measurable inches, our family's been farming in this area. Well, I'm the third generation, the grandson would be the fifth. Most all of it, we're irrigating our family about 2,200 acres. And most of it's center pivot irrigation. When you're actually measuring inches to the soil, this year's corn crop, it took water from the irrigation system to germinate the seed. We did not even have germinating moisture. It's the driest year I can ever remember. We came on May 15th. We didn't shut off until the 15th of September. And we ran wide open the entire time. And it was an unallocated year. So the system was pushed to the max for 5-6 months. It was an unbelievable irrigation season. But to answer your question, measurable water, I averaged 32 inches per I averaged 32 inches of rain on our corn. That's what it took this year. So over almost 3 foot of water, actual water, but we had absolutely no help in 100-degree heat the whole summer. So, CFS and acre foot, those are all calculations, but if you ever wanted, because it's recorded on my phone, exactly how many inches you're putting on in a month's time per application, all that.
Okay.
Demand. A lot. It takes a lot of water.
Oh, I bet it does. Thank you.
Great. Thanks for all the explanation. I do have one question for you, Director Mead. Because they're getting the 23.5 million of ARPA money, which is going to the Nebraska, right? That they put in there. Can we use that for the pre-construction, these amounts that you wanted to say, hey, should we fund this? Why can't they use that? They have to use that money up by the end of December of 26, right?
Yeah, Madam Chair, that's a good point. They do have an MOU with Gearing Fort Laramie that kind of spells out that Nebraska is going to pay 100% until the ARPA is done, and then GID will make up the difference till they get back to that 49-51%. So that would be a concern if they didn't have their loan, was that they'd be on the hook to then make that up, even though they did spend all the ARPA money. Because I think at some point Nebraska would want you guys to pay your share. So, but that's a good point. And seeing something similar for LaPrel, which we'll hear in a minute. I'll be a bit of a hypocrite for not spending state money. I don't care as much. So in LaPrel's case, we'll be spending Bureau money for early work packages.
So Director, so then basically what we're saying is, yes, we can use that Nebraska money to do these pre-construction, getting the roads built, getting ready for it, correct?
That would be Nebraska that would have to make that decision. I think they've made that decision, right? So.
Kevin?
Yeah, Madam Chair, that was kind of a workaround around this, since we couldn't use Wyoming Water Development money until we secured, had access to that loan money. But it also, like you say, very good point. It just coincides with them having to use that money anyway. So that's why we did that MOU. And so I don't know that the early package is as big of a hurdle now that we have that MOU in place. So it could be a non-issue anyway.
Great, thank you.
So, thanks.
Any further questions? Okay, any further comments, Director?
I guess I'd like to ask the board if they'd consider early access if there's any extra money, simply because it's going to go fast once it gets started. For example, going in, we don't know what a digger shield's going to cost. We're estimating between $8 and $10 million just for the shield. And to get it built, that's not, relocating or anything like that. But when it comes to the portal work, I think the money, the ARPA money that Gearing Fort Laramie's got, we'll chew that up in 8 months. Once we're rolling, it'll be, I think we'll walk right through that. Not knowing what our 60% actual is, we're supposed to be getting it, but I would hope if there's any extra or excess to consider some of this, because I think we would use it. I think we're going to use those funds fairly quickly. I really do. And I don't want to, the longer we can hold off taking on a $50 million loan is what I'm afraid of. The longer we can hold it off, that just the interest alone, what we could save. So.
Thank you, Sean.
Yeah.
Director, my question would be, we set aside some money already, 21 million, right, for this, and that's already been appropriated and it's ready, it's there. So why do we have to fund extra money? Can't we use that 21 million to do this?
Madam Chair, I would agree with that. That $21,810,000 is for 2 tunnels to get rebuilt. So I think that was the expectation of the legislature when they funded that. If I recall correctly, and I may be incorrect, but as far as early work packages and portals being 25, 26, I thought you guys could get through the portals and it would be the tunnel number 2 before you would need additional funding from outside the ARPA funds. Is that an accurate statement? I can't remember for sure. Close. Okay.
We start on tunnel 2.
Yeah, when you start on tunnel 2, which would be 26, 27 timeframe.
Yeah.
Yep.
Speaker Summers.
Madam Chairman, thank you. I just want clarification on the loan. Right now you're waiting for federal government approval for the loan. Is that correct? And then something that it just made me ponder there is you said you wanted to hold off on the loan. I get that. You don't have to pay interest on the loan. But if you got to get the loan secured, so I assume you have to take the loan when they give it to you. So just remind me again of the timeline to get your loan. And I assume you will take the loan when you get it and then hope you can get some money to pay it off before the 20 or 30 years is up.
Good, thanks.
Yeah, Madam Chair. We were told in April that we were awarded the loan, but we cannot access that until their deck review is completed. Which, like I say, we're looking at 3 to 5 months or however long that'll be. At that time, they will have a contract for us to enter into that loan. And like our loan XM loan that they gave us for design and pre-construction services, we signed that. We have not used any of that yet. So we can sign the contract and we would expend all the grant money first before we would draw on that loan. So, yeah.
Madam Chair, just one more comment.
Thanks.
So getting back to that timeline of events and the expectations at this point, and things could change, would be that they wouldn't need to get into the 21,810,000 until they start working on tunnel 2, which is the winter into the spring of, from 26 to 27. So we go through another legislative session at that point. So if they can't acquire additional grant money and they decide they want to come back and ask for additional state money, then there would be an opportunity before we would get into spending the state dollars that were appropriated in 2022 for there to be transparency in the 26th legislative session that one, they're asking for additional funds, or that they would try to get done 1 tunnel with the $21 million instead of 2 tunnels or something to that effect. I guess my fear is that we would, the expectations were 2 tunnels. We get out there, and again, this is kind of a moot point because they've got their loan as the backup plan, but to then get through 1 tunnel and be like, okay, well, we need another $20 million or $22 million to finish tunnel 1. when the expectations were to get 2 tunnels for the amount of money that was appropriated in 2022. So I just don't want to get into that situation for our program.
Thank you, Director. I think that's it. Okay. Commissioner Glick?
Your chart says construction tunnel 2 first.
Yeah.
Is that the,
That's the one that failed.
so when you say tunnel 2, you mean tunnel 1, right? When you start tunnel 1?
Well, tunnel 2, I'll let you explain.
Yeah, Madam Chair, Commissioner Glick. We would actually start construction on Tunnel 2 first is the plan. Yeah, yep. Yep. Yeah, I don't know if I misspoke earlier, and I may have misspoke too. It's just, so it gets, so,
Right, you always use numerical order, so that's fine.
yeah.
Great. Well, thank you, Kevin, Sean, Marcus. We appreciate you coming over and letting us get some questions in. So thank you and good luck with everything there. We hope it all goes well and that you get the grants too.
We appreciate the time. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you for all that you're doing there. I think you guys will get it done. Look into your emergency declaration. I think that might help you out,
Yeah, we will
especially
definitely.
with if you can't get the water rights to the actual ground.
Yep, we will definitely check on that.
Yep.
Thanks a lot. Thank you. Okay, then Director, do we need a break or do you want to just go on?
Madam Chair, I imagine this next one will be just as long, if not longer. So I would say if you guys want to take a quick break, that would be probably appropriate.
I don't like to give breaks, but I'm gonna be nice today. We'll go ahead and let's make it quick. What is it now? It's
3:15.
10 minutes. Okay, thanks. Okay, we'll go ahead and resume our meeting so we get everyone in and out. Okay. All right, Director Mead, you can lead us on to the next path here.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I'm just going to hand it over to Gary Shadow. He's the chairman, president of the La Prella Irrigation District.
Welcome, Gary.
Thank you, Jason. Madam Chairman Dalton and members of the commission, we appreciate your time today. My name, as he said, is Gary Shadow. I'm chairman of the La Prella Irrigation District. We also have our two consultants with us today. We have Pete Roush with Respect, Corey Foreman with HDR. As you've maybe all heard, our dam was just last week totally decommissioned. We're no longer able to store water, and we are going through the process of how they're going to do that. So this, due to that recent result, it's put a huge impact on our local community, our local economy, and of course, our shareholders. And as you members of the commission who are in agriculture and our farmers and ranchers know that without water, it's very difficult to operate your business or keep it viable. I know the question that, we'll get right to the question of funding. I know that's what's kind of on everybody's mind. At 30% design now, with escalated costs out to 2028, we have a broad range of around cost of about 116 million to around 178 million. We are looking at a shortfall. The Bureau of Rec says that most of these projects like this have been running at a 30% shortfall. We have been proactive to let the commission know what are we doing about this. We have reached out to all three of our federal legislatures. We have had several meetings with Kathy Lenz, who is a grant coordinator with Senator Lummis's office. Each of these meetings, she's brought in a lot of other agencies. They are all trying to look into extra funding, maybe projects that didn't use all their funding, and maybe we could tap into that and get a little bit from each one. That's one opportunity. I just recently had some correspondence from James Levitt, who's in Representative Harriet Hageman's office. And I've told him of the shortfall, and we're just starting on that correspondence. We've also talked to Kurt Meyer, of course, the Wyoming's treasurer, about maybe some extra funding. Due to the economic impact that this has on our community, we do feel it's fair to go to our local commissioners. Our shareholders, support, like any community, they support our community. They support the local businesses. They, buy groceries, support our schools, support our churches. That money goes around and around. They buy equipment and parts. And so now there's going to be a shortfall there that is going to hurt our economy. So that's why we feel that we have started conversations with our local commissioners. 3 of them were at our meetings last night, so that they do realize that we may be trying to ask them for some funding. Also, this is starting to already, we've been at a restricted level in the dam. And we're already noticing shortfalls in the springs and the wells. The gallons per minute have been affected. And our city does rely on a spring that's west of Douglas for a big share of their water. It's close to the dam. There's some wells there that are already showing a loss of production as the dam has been drained. So again, we will be, talking to our local city officials also. This is unknown just what all effect this will have now because this total decommissioning just happened. And like I said, it's going to be a huge hardship. We have been trying to be proactive. We still believe in this project. And we are a small district, but, and so any type of funding that we can get to make up that shortfall, and I'm sure the question on your mind is how much of a shortfall, and it could be around 57 million shortfall. And if I miss some of these figures, I'll ask these guys to help me out here, but especially Chase. But we had 100 million from that our district procured from the infrastructure bill, Bureau of Rec. Some of that is being used currently for design. Like I said, we're at 30% design. And there'll be about 3 million of that does go towards administration. So we actually don't maybe get the whole 100 million. And the state has, we've got 30 million pledged from the state that will be used just once the federal funds are all gone, then that to be used for construction. We are close to getting our CMAR, which we hope then would help secure that guaranteed maximum price, have a little bit better figure. And that should be coming out in the next few weeks, possibly, or month, the CMAR.
It'll be,
And that'll be, anyway, I'm sure you have questions. We're gonna have the consultants give you a real thorough presentation here of where we're at and how we got to this point. And then any questions after they're done, I'm sure they'll be able to answer, or myself, and we have a couple other board members here. So again, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Gary. And so I guess, Pete, are you doing Pete and Corey?
Yeah, Madam Chair. Maybe Chase, did you have something to say first, or should we jump into the update?
Let me go ahead and talk a little bit about the federal funding, just to line things out a little bit. So fiscal year 2023, the Bureau had a spending plan of $5 million. We applied for that money and we did get that, and we have been using that for part of our design. Fiscal year 24, their spend plan was $30 million. And Gary mentioned the $3 million is being retained by the Bureau of Rec right now for administration. It doesn't mean that they're going to use all $3 million. Whatever they don't use will go back to the project, but that is $3 million that is subtracted from the amount that we can use. We did request $8.2081 million to get us through pre-construction, and we received that funding. Subsequently applied for the remaining 18 million and received that. In October, went through in here about a month ago, there's now $65 million left of the 100 million. And we have been making requests for the entire amount all along. But in October, we made our final request to get all of that money obligated to this project, because it's not necessarily earmarked for LaPrelle Dam. It's for a CARES Act project. And it just so happens that this dam is the only project in the country that qualifies for that right now, but you never know how things could change, right? It doesn't look like we're going to be able to get that entire $65 million now, but we expect fiscal year 25 to have a $31 million spend plan. And then in fiscal year 26, we expect a $34 million spend plan. And we believe we'll be successful in obtaining all those funds.
Thank you, Chase. Any questions? Not yet? Okay.
Madam Chair,
Okay, Vice Chair.
a clarification, Chase, is there a risk that Bureau money could go to some other CARES Act project if you're not able to get that money?
I don't expect that. I don't. We're the only project that qualified for the funding. We're the only ones who have made any kind of a request so far. It would take a change in the law, probably. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Okay. Then I guess we'll go ahead and have Pete and Corey share their presentation.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair. Pete Roush, I'm an engineer with Respec and project manager on the project. And yeah, with me, go ahead.
Madam Chair, Corey Foreman, project manager with HDR.
So, Madam Chair, we'd like to give both a brief project update, but then also really look at how we've gotten to where we are today with the breach order. We'll cover this really in three parts, starting with the project update, and then go through evaluations of the existing dam, and then we'll go on the path forward. Forgive me. Yeah, I need to remember to coordinate with Katie. All right. So briefly, the history of studies of the Laprelle Irrigation District recently through water development. Starting with the watershed study, the Glendale watershed study, 2015, 2016, obviously identified Laprelle Irrigation District as a major water user, and recommendation for a level 1 master plan came out of that. The master plan was done 2017, 2018. Major recommendations coming out of the master plan were first looking at rockfall hazards around the dam. That had been identified as an issue through the study, and right behind it was evaluating the dam itself. Like the other districts, of course, Laprelle has several other infrastructure needs, but these were the top two. That led to the level 2 study that began focused on the rockfall hazard analysis in 2019. In September of that year, HDR structural team did a limited inspection of the dam. We'll go into that a little bit more, but that ultimately led to focusing on the dam itself. We found issues. We shifted gears and ended up doing a thorough inspection of the dam. And that ultimately led to the determination that this dam has reached the end of its useful life and needs to be either undergo a major rehabilitation or needs to be replaced. So that at the end of 2019 was really the conclusion. 2020, we amended the project again to focus on just evaluating the options. And we looked at 4 different options for replacement, just 4 different dam types, as well as an evaluation of a rehabilitation of the existing structure. And ultimately that identified a new roller compacted concrete dam just downstream as the best option, most feasible, most cost effective. And just for comparison, somewhat in light of the recent findings, I think worth saying that the infill option, if we call it that, the rehabilitation of the dam, the existing dam, to get to appropriate safety standards, just comparative cost was going to be 10% more expensive than the new roller compacted concrete. So that conclusion near the end of 2020 and going into 2021, then we shifted into an appraisal level design of the roller compacted concrete dam. I think I'll call it RCC. It's easier to say. That study included, of course, advancing design kind of to what we would call 10%, but geotechnical analysis. We had done some minor geotechnical investigation in 2020 as well, just to validate the geologic data we had. And then we, in 2021, really wanted to get a better understanding of the existing foundation to help with the design. So that went through 21 and into 22. We delivered the 10% design in 22. And at that time, in looking at potential cost estimate as well as potential schedule, we had identified that a target for start of construction would be sometime in early 2026. As of today, we're still targeting that schedule. So after that, we shifted again into further design analysis. That included physical modeling, seismic study. We've got a fault coming into the valley here from the south that really needed additional analysis. We had a site-specific seismic study done, additional geotechnical drilling, with a very complicated site and complicated geology. That's when we first put drill rig up on the canyon wall with a helicopter. And then into 2023, amended the contract again to really go towards 30% design. At that time is when we tapped into the federal money in May of 23. And so May 23 through into 24, additional geotechnical analysis, additional helicopter drilling, and yeah, that leads to I guess a little more detail here just on what's happened in the last year. And completing that 30% design really included updating the spillway design, structural analysis and modeling, updating the construction cost estimate and basis of design report. Like Gary alluded to, maybe just to say again, the cost estimate at 30% to give the range, I think is appropriate, anywhere from 116 million to 178 million. And that's just, standard kind of bars around the estimate, just given where we're at on design. We've also delivered the 2023, or we're finalizing the 2023 geologic data report, going through all the data that's been collected 2020 through 2023. That includes the fault and fold evaluation. We've been moving forward with NEPA, environmental surveys. That's coming along. And we're targeting a finding of no significant impact coming in the first half of next year to keep things moving. We've been shifting gears now from what has been a level 2 project all this time into the level 3 project, and changes to those contracts and planning to get the CMAR integrated into this. And we've just finalized the contracting for design. Got signatures this morning, actually. But then really looking at the last 2 to 3 months, what we've been doing has been really focused on the existing dam. And so we'll jump into looking at that.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'm going to talk a little bit about really what has been all consuming for us on this project for about the last 3 months. And is the topic of the day. I'm going to give just a little bit of a brief history going back to the 2022 inspections and kind of the findings of that, just to kind of set the table for where we were at the beginning of the summer, so we can kind of talk through where we're at today, what led to today. Okay. So as Pete just alluded to, the very first inspection was a very limited inspection of the three buttresses back in September of 2019. That's where we found the large crack on buttress 17, it was about a 10-foot vertical crack. That's where we put everything on hold kind of for the feasibility study as it sat at that point. And we led to the first full inspection with the rope access team and a drone survey of every surface of the dam. So the first full inspection was in December of 2019. And then we did a follow-up inspection as part of the state engineer's office 5-year return interval on inspections of this dam. So we repeated that process in 2022. And that's what I'm showing on the screen right now. This is all the cracks that were found in each of those 2 inspections in 2022. It's, looking at the side of the buttresses. So you have a slab and you have the 17 buttresses. It's looking all the cracks on one figure. So this is not any one a buttress, but it's all of them composited in one figure. And so going back to that 2019, that very first inspection, when we looked at that, what we were hoping is that it was an isolated issue, a problem with just buttress 17, and we could really focus our rehabilitation on buttress 17. And what you really see here on the figure from 2022, or as updated in 2022, you have systematic shear cracking throughout the dam. There's numerous issues with the dam. Some of those buttress, some of those cracks as shown kind of up towards the top where that portal window's at. We have a couple of buttresses, both buttress 7, buttress 8, that have that shear angle crack that go from the slab all the way to the downstream end of the buttress, really on both sides of the crack. So they were very concerning at the time. Those occur, in that kind of 54-60 range, just as a reference. When the first crack on buttress 17 was found, the restriction was put in place to restrict the water to the 54-75 level. Full pool is at 54-90. That restriction limits them to about 60%, 55 to 60% of the total storage capacity. And so really the findings of that were, I apologize, we gave a slightly different presentation last night. So the findings of that were that this was not just an isolated incident, it's the shear cracking. We also took core samples at that time. We had very poor concrete strengths. We had carbonation of the concrete occurring in locations, and we had found very poor bonding of the concrete to the aggregate. And so generally speaking, the outcome of that 2022 inspection and really all the work up to that point was the dam has reached the end of its useful life. It's in very poor condition. Also in 2022, we did a risk analysis. This was actually a process paid for using FEMA funds, led through the state engineer's office. It's a whole presentation in of itself. I promise I will not cover it. 2 slides. Really just the outcome of this is we looked at a lot of different failure modes in this risk analysis. As plotted multiple failure modes, evaluated anything above those dotted lines on the screen is unacceptable or above the tolerable risk thresholds. And so the total risk is plotted there in the white box. The outcome of this is really that the total risk associated with this dam is above tolerable levels. And I should point out at this time that this assessment only evaluates the potential for loss of life. It does not incorporate into the allowable risk or tolerable risks anything related to infrastructure. And as we know, a catastrophic failure of this dam would have incredible impacts to downstream infrastructure besides just the potential loss of life, including potentially taking out the 2 interstate bridges. And so really all of this work led to, kind of where we were at the beginning of the summer. It held true. The overall condition of the dam is poor. The reservoir, that risk assessment was focused on the risk associated at the restricted level, not at full pool at 54-75. And even at 54-75 with the restriction in place, the risk associated with this structure exceeded the tolerable risk limits. Interim risk reduction measures would be justified to help mitigate this risk. And basically it just reinforced the idea that you could not remove this risk, the restricted level of 54-75 that needed to stay in place at a minimum. Ultimately, while restricting lower elevations down may reduce the overall likelihood and consequence of the dam, if you have a lower restriction level, the likelihood of a failure would go down. Ultimately, it doesn't really reduce the total risk below those dotted lines because the hydrologic risk, the chance of filling up in any given year is high enough that you're really not significantly reducing the potential loss of life with this dam at lower level restrictions, and it would still be above the tolerable risk limits. So that's between what Pete talked about and what I talked about. That took us all the way to the beginning of 2024, and then things started to change. Kick it back to Pete.
All right, on the crack meter location slide. Yep. Thanks, Corey. The thorough inspection we did in 2019, at that time, we knew that we had cracks and we wanted to install monitoring on those. The irrigation district actually paid to have these installed and perform monitoring. Shown on the screen is just the location of the 5 crack meters that were installed, all higher up on the dam. That's where we had seen the most apparent cracks that we were concerned about at that time. Yeah, that's it. Thank you. This is just a picture of what these crack meters look like. Meter spans the crack. It's actually anchored and epoxied in place with a data cable running to a data logger. We have from that data logger the data sent out by cell and we get nearly real time. I think maybe every 15 minutes on the update. So the crack monitoring installed late 2019, went through 2020 and 2021, and we were really watching for, first kind of understanding how do these behave, and watching for any significant changes. The graph up there is all over the place, but really what you see happening is each of the crack meters correspond pretty strongly with temperature, both daily and seasonally. And so we started to see those correlations and how those patterns typically go. What we were really looking for was any kind of correlation with water level in the reservoir. Ultimately, by the end of 2021, having a couple seasons under our belt, we didn't see any clear correlation with water level. But given that we had all the crack meters up high on the dam, we thought it'd be good to put some lower on the dam, and just really to continue monitoring for any change in behavior. Ultimately, at the time, the irrigation district, this is was another cost for them, decided not to extend the contract beyond 2021. But I did make the decision to keep them out there and keep them collecting data because the situation seemed important enough. So just to cover these briefly, this is just showing data through 2022, 2023. We're checking in occasionally, looking for anything unusual, and we actually set thresholds around what we had seen as normal crack movement, so that if we would get any crack outside of that, we'd get an alert. What led us to where we are today. In early August, really is the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, we received alerts that crack meter 5, which is one that had a lot of fluctuation throughout all of the monitoring we've done, it had exceeded the threshold we'd set. So we check it out. It hadn't exceeded by much. We speculated that really as hot as it was at the time, and the way this one's correlated strongly with temperature, that may have driven it. Ultimately, we pulled in crack meter 5 to look a little bit closer at what we have on the screen. There is all 5 years of monitoring data. It's displacement up above, temperature down below, just showing, we really didn't see any significant changes in behavior, but if anything, maybe a slight trend up in the displacement over those 5 years. But really only talking about 1/100th of an inch. And for scale, if you're familiar with a mechanical pencil, that lead is 2/100ths of an inch. So it's a very small change in displacement. Really concluded that this is noteworthy. We didn't think it was concerning at the time. But what this led to was taking a look at the other crack meters just to see if anything else unusual was going on. And what I have here, crack meter 3, is one that over the 5 years really did not have much significant changes in displacement compared to, say, crack meter 5. But looking at it closely, what I have up there with the dashed red line is really what we would have expected. It's typical behavior to have done. As we look back, we noticed that really starting in 2023, May 2023, it deviated from that expected behavior. But again, here, even into 2024, as that it did ramp up, but still talking only a displacement of 1/100th of an inch in that change. Also on our minds was, okay, we're seeing these changes. Does this relate at all to the earthquake? If folks remember, we had the earthquake right before the commission tour in 2021, and that really didn't seem to have anything to do with it. Also looking at crack meter 4, we basically saw the same kind of change in behavior about the same time, but even less of a change in displacement, right? 6/1000ths of an inch. And so evaluating, well, we've got these 2 crack meters that are at either ends of the dam, just showing where those are at up there. And really it brought forth these questions. First, we are seeing this change. What's the status of the reservoir? And at that time, the irrigation district had finished irrigating, had turned off the reservoir August 6th, I believe, and the reservoir elevation was low. So that was good, and really, the conclusion was, okay, the reservoir's low. This isn't necessarily urgent. But the next questions are, have these crack meters come loose? Do we really trust the data? And needing to look into that. But then with the change on the two crack meters, both starting in May of 2023, was there some significant event that may have caused that? And if so, seeing this on both ends of the dam, is there something going on in the middle of the dam? So, I already touched on, the reservoir elevation was low. We got out there September 17th to inspect the crack meters and found them solid, well bonded, really determined that the system was fully functional. So that answered that question. But then looking at what was going on in May of 2023, the reservoir was experiencing pretty significant inflow that spring. The district was kind of fighting that and taking turns around the clock watching what was going on with the dam. And as the reservoir elevation continued to climb, the district had to open the main outlets more and more, and eventually they eventually got to where they were wide open, right? And so this is the graph is just showing discharge from the dam over those 5 years, right? And highlighting in red times when discharge exceeded 250 CFS. The capacity below up to the restriction of the outlet works is only about 350 CFS. This next slide is just tracking reservoir elevation over those 5 years. Again, those highlights showing when they had high discharge. But yeah, ultimately there in May, the reservoir was coming up and nearing the restriction. So the outlet works were cranked open. As we kind of zoom out, looking at all the crack meters over all 5 years and how things related to that May 2023. Again, fairly apparent with both crack meter 3 and crack meter 4 that's when we started to see that change in behavior. And then digging in a little bit deeper with the data just to make sure that we were confident in what we were seeing. We evaluated one data point to the next, just the difference between one data point to the next, and tracked that over these 5 years. And crack meter 3, kind of the most apparent that really the data was relatively quiet up to that time, that moment in time in May of 2023, and then it started to vary significantly. And we actually see that some change in behavior with all the crack meters starting at that time. This is just zooming in on that crack meter 3 to show really kind of narrowing in on when the discharge was cranked up and seeing that clear change in behavior. So back to the questions, right? We with the reservoir at that time, early August and I guess into September now, the reservoir is low. We didn't think this was urgent, but the crack meters had not come loose. We trust the data. We identified there was a significant event in May of 2023, but the last question being, is there something moving in the middle of the dam? We recommended an inspection and worked with HDR structural team to set that up.
Okay. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the inspection. Okay, just to kind of recap, we have movement in the top 2 corners of the dam. We don't know anything. We did not know at this time what was happening in the middle of the dam. And so we're not really seeing the cause of the movement per se. What we're doing is we're seeing a symptom, and we don't know what's happening in the middle. So through multiple conversations with the state engineer's office, LID and others, the decision was made to move forward, do a full inspection. Again, following the procedure I already talked about in 2019, 2022, we had a rope access team out there as shown here in this slide, doing the ends of the buttress, looking at those visually, looking at as much as they could, the side of the buttresses. You can only get so far inside the dam on ropes shown there on the right. And then we looked at the slab of the dam as well. That was coupled with the drone flight to look at every interior surface. We have not fully processed all of the video data yet. We are still in process of, writing the full inspection report, but we found a couple of things that we brought to the attention of others almost immediately. The first one to talk about is the crack on the slab of the dam. And just kind of as a reminder, you know, that this dam was built, constructed between 1906 and 1909. But there was a significant rehab done in the 70s. And so that rehab included adding a new slab on top of the original slab. So you still have that 1909 concrete on the original slab. You have the new slab on top of it, which is now 50 years old. But relatively every inspection we've done to date, that newer concrete, the slab, the top slab is in relatively good condition. We didn't find any issues previous. So when we looked at it, we did find a fairly significant new crack, not previously documented. It's about a 10-foot long slab between elevations 5426 and 5434. So well below the water level restriction, much lower than really that systematic shear cracking that I shown earlier. So it's on a much lower location. It's between buttresses 7 and 8. And you can see in the photo here on the left, you know, our inspector is actually, the crack is there at the arrow and it's almost directly above the outlet works. That's the box you can see. The decision was made prior to conducting this inspection to go ahead and drain the dam to the level of the outlet works in advance of the inspection. So that's why we can see that outlet works there in that photo. Just to kind of, you know, zoom in on, you know, you can't really see it in that first photo, but this was a significant crack. It's about a inch wide at places. There's about an inch of vertical offset. You can really see on these photos. This is a very significant crack. And we've hypothesized, we haven't really done a whole lot of structural analysis, but we have a hypothesis of what's happening. Again, this is similar to the cracks though. This is not the cause. This is another symptom. Something is happening within the center of that dam that caused this. And so the crack is kind of where my fingers come together and you have a buttress on each end, you have a buttress in the middle. Either buttress 7 has buckled down, putting downward pressure on that, or what we think is more likely is that buttress 9, which I'm going to talk about here in a minute. The buttress on the other side of the crack is actually something has buckled. It's a reverse moment on that slab, and it's pulling that concrete up. Something has shifted and pulled that concrete to form this crack. So this is not an insignificant finding. This is a major crack. We did not notice anything on the underside of the dam during the summer. There was no water gushing through the dam that was not previously noted. Well, remember, we do still have that 1909 concrete underneath, and that's why we believe we didn't see anything. The upper slab is separating from the lower slab. So I already mentioned buttress 9, the hypothesis, and this was really, as they were looking at it, they were hypothesizing that it was lifting the concrete up. While we were out there, we also took a close look at buttress 9. And I'm going to jump in, just show you a couple of photos. We did find new cracks on both sides of buttress 9, showing kind of on a zoomed in look here on the left. There's the upstream or the side of the slab. Again, this is much lower than what we talked about. So this is well inside the dam. This crack goes, as shown here, all the way from the top of the slab all the way down to the foundation. And if we go one more slide, it's on both sides. So this is new, and this is, again, another significant finding consistent of what is going on in the middle of the dam. Well, this buttress is is shifting. It's in an active failure mode now. Thank you. We're showing the video there, which gives you a little bit better look. And I know it's a small screen. Maybe you can see it back in there, but let me just kind of watch the video for a second. There you can see the crack right there as we trace it up. You can visually, standing on the bottom, looking all the way towards the top, you can see it from the ground level. This is not an insignificant crack by any means. Okay, we'll go to the next slide. So just, I've kind of visually or, verbally described where the crack's at. This is showing the approximate location. This is just a straight line. It does kind of, it's a little bit jagged and such, but, we were really focusing on the top of the dam where those shear cracking was. That was the big fear around. And when we put the restriction level, this is now in the lower part of the dam. And we believe to the right of that line possibly has shifted or buckled somewhat, which has caused that crack, which is on this figure here. That crack on the slab is slightly upstream, it's at a higher elevation to the right of the line shown there. So both of these two things, those two new findings kind of were our worst fears realized. When we found the crack data, concerning, not alarming. We changed that statement after finding these two cracks. We changed it from no longer is this concerning, this is clearly an alarming situation. The conclusion, after talking to many of our structural engineers, talking to the SEO and others, and LID, obviously, it was determined that really at this point in time, based on that failing crack within buttress 9, the dam is unsafe to store any water at any level. So that's where we're at today. That's where we were at after the inspection. A lot of work has happened since the inspection. There have been a lot of conversations. There's been a lot of analysis, and Pete's going to talk about that.
All right. So, yeah, given that finding and looking at where we are in October of 2024, the dam itself, as I mentioned, even if we would take water up to the restriction elevation, has a maximum discharge capacity of 350 cubic feet per second, which is dramatically undersized from what we find ourselves needing to do, which is store no water, meaning inflow to the reservoir typically regularly exceeds 350 CFS. And let's see, that combined with now our time frame, ultimately that leading to the conclusion that in order to store no water, our timeline is we're up against spring runoff 2025. And so we need to come up with a solution and implement that solution before spring runoff 2025. So we got together with State Engineer's Office, the Irrigation District, Water Development Office, and senior engineers from HDR to really work through this situation and evaluate what are the options here. Ultimately, we need to reduce the risk of a dam failure, and really putting public safety paramount here. In order to do this, one way or another, we need to be able to bypass extreme flows without exceeding safe storage volumes, and ultimately trying to preserve as much benefit as we could to the irrigators and really also to the new dam construction project for water management. This just demonstrating, the chart on the right is typical inflow to the reservoir from 83 years of data, and just generally demonstrating, if we're trying to beat spring runoff, we can see that it'll start to tick up by April 1st. That's where April 1st comes from. Chart on the right, we can maybe come back to, but really looking at what are the flow probabilities above the reservoir, because now we're going to have to deal with that through this structure and of course downstream. So we looked at, we'll talk about a few options here. The first option, again, in trying to ultimately increase the capacity of discharge through the dam, and looking at doing that without necessarily removing the dam, given the tight timeline. And so we looked at installing 2 new 8-foot conduits to give us some control, but then also cutting these holes in between buttresses to provide essentially emergency spillway through these windows, and doing that to try to keep our water elevation from exceeding the 5420 is kind of where we settled at, given the location of the crack, to pass some significant flow without significantly exceeding 5420. What we found with this option, even cutting all these holes, to really pass what we thought would be a reasonable event, would require filling the reservoir up to 5440, and we decided that really was not acceptable. So we moved to we had to get away from the idea of holes through the dam and really take the dam down and leave the remainder of the dam as the whole thing as an emergency spillway, just to pass significant flows. And so evaluating this option, taking the dam down, but still installing 2 new conduits to help with control, but only going down to that elevation 5420, which a few numbers for reference. Sediment in the reservoir is at 5395. So this is 25 feet above the sediment in the reservoir. At 5420, we got almost 500 acre feet of storage. I think that's the main point there. And so just kind of thinking through how could we actually implement this? At this point, we're not really defining means and methods, but we need to get the dam down. So that could be potentially some controlled blast or mechanical means, but we'll get into that with a contractor. But the next question here, and leaving it at 5420, this structure would still qualify as a high hazard dam subject to state engineer's authority. And the question is, can we do this in time, engineer it and construct it in a way that we would feel confident that this would not fail and cause major flooding downstream from a failure. That being a little bit uncertain, we asked ourselves, well, what would a failure at this level look like? And jump to the next slide and go ahead and play the video. This is just so we put together this dam failure analysis of, if we're at 5420, we're storing 500 acre feet of water and the dam fails. What we're seeing is really, it's still a very significant, it causes significant flooding downstream. The video demonstrates, just for some reference, from the time of failure to the time the flood would reach Natural Bridge Park, less than 10 minutes. And we only went that far just given we had such a short time frame to really evaluate this. Just went to Natural Bridge Park as kind of a benchmark for us. If the dam would fail, would Natural Bridge Park survive? And this suggests that at least at this level, probably not. So a few more numbers on the next slide. And forgive me, it's a little messy. The table on the upper right describes 3 different dam failures that we evaluated, and really just, we don't know exactly what it's going to look like. How wide would the failure get? But if we just look at the middle row there and assume that 3 bays, 3 sections between buttresses, if those would fail, we have about 60 feet of a breach there. The peak discharge from that failure would be 20,000 cubic feet per second. And by the time it gets to Natural Bridge, we still have over 14,000 cubic feet per second and at least 13 feet of depth coming into that park. So just for some quick references, I won't go through all these numbers on the side, just for comparison. What does 20,000 CFS look like? Well, 23,000 is the flood of record on the North Platte at Orrin. In 1899, it hit 23,000, hit that again in 1965. A lot of you could probably fathom, 3,000 cubic feet per second is kind of a typical average in June on the river. But then also looking at 20,000, that 20,000 cubic feet per second is the 100-year flood on the North Platte. Or if we're looking at Laprelle Creek itself, 20,000 is like having a 500-year event. And maybe to make the point of, if we would leave that structure in at 5420 with a storage of only 500 acre feet and the limited discharge through the dam, that could fill with a much smaller event, maybe a 5 or 10 year event. And what would happen is if that failed, that 5 or 10 year event, ultimately that discharge gets multiplied through the failure up to something like a 500-year event. So given all that, ultimately, we ruled out trying to maintain any storage with our concept for removal. It led to this final concept of same idea as that second, but really just taking it all the way down to an elevation of 5,400. At that point, we've got kind of a nominal 16 acre feet of storage. We're 5 feet above the sediment, and this at this point the state would not consider what's left behind to be a dam. We would still need to take the dam down and then engineer to some extent stabilization of what's left, because we need that remainder to hold back all that sediment. This just being a section through the dam of a concept of how that may come about, but using the material that's taken down from the dam, let's call it rubble, and I think we would have to have some minimum size to this, but get it broken up and pushed up under the remaining slab is one idea of how to stabilize this. We may need to go beyond just pushing it into place and potentially grout, but to come away with something that we feel reasonably confident is stable enough to hold back that remaining slab and also pass flood flows from that slab down to the creek channel below. Now this is very busy, and we can come back to this if there's interest, but this is really to demonstrate high level all that's happened since we received that crack meter alert in early August. Yeah, as things progressed, and sharing information, getting out and checking the crack meters in September, finding that, yeah, we believe the data, this is concerning and we need an inspection. We got that inspection on the 14th of October. But then really, especially from that point forward, all the coordination that has taken place between Irrigation District, State Engineer's Office, and Water Development Office as we try to digest the situation and find our way forward. So look into from here moving forward now in trying to implement a solution. Again, what we have in front of us is trying to get the dam brought down and removing this threat before spring runoff. If we started April 1st and work backwards, working through with some of the senior folks on the team, thinking through construction, if we consider maybe 80 days worth of construction to get this done, to get the dam down, we really need to have a contractor out there by the middle of January. And so between now and the middle of January to really work through development of our plan as far as we can, but we really want to get a contractor on board to contribute to how is this going to come down, and hopefully solicit proposals and consider any option that can meet the goal. And that is to say that, of course, this is such a tight timeline, and we will have to be doing this work through winter. We'll need to be considering backup plans and backups to backups on how to get this done. This next slide is kind of shifting gears now, because from here moving forward, we have that in front of us, and we need to. That's our highest priority, is moving that forward. At the same time, given the situation and the irrigation district being without a dam, not that it wasn't already urgent, but it's that much more urgent to be moving forward with the construction of the new dam. And so this is the path forward on the replacement project. Again, we mentioned, we're tracking to get to finding no significant impact in maybe June of 2025. Get to 60% design shortly after that, 90% design early in 2026, and then get to the dam construction proper by June of 2026. worth noting that there are a few things similar to what was mentioned with the Goshen project that some early work may help expedite that schedule, or if nothing else, reduce schedule risk if we can implement them. Now, the replacement dam project and the removal project, from a permitting standpoint, we've been coordinating with the permitting agencies. Bureau of Reclamation still as the lead. They've said, I guess I feel like I'm talking for Jason, but they have said that the Bureau funds can go towards the removal. So that's a major hurdle for us. And really, removal was always going to be part of the project anyway. We're just talking about doing it 2 or 3 years earlier now. But the permitting, we're basically going to split the actions for moving permitting forward, and permitting for the removal. The Bureau is confident they can move that forward under a categorical exclusion, working with the Corps of Engineers and a nationwide permit that fits a categorical exclusion. And we're already starting down that road. Should be happy to take any questions.
Thank you both for that excellent presentation. This has been a struggle. So do I have questions from? Okay. Representative Lyman.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. One curiosity question as I'm listening to this conversation, what is the need for a buttress dam? I mean, if you're going to go back in there and build the new structure, how can this dam serve to be utilized in that construction process? I mean, I guess what I'm kind of hearing, and maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, is that we're going to tear it all out and then end up having to go back in and build something to hold back water or control flow as we're building the structure. Are you planning on using part of this dam to work through the process of building the new dam and utilize some of that structure to control flows going forward?
Yeah, Madam Chairman, we that was our goal as we worked through the options. That was one of the priorities. Was can we leave enough of the existing structure in place to help manage flows for new construction, and ultimately coming to the conclusion that there's nothing with this existing dam, given our timeline, that we could do and leave that option on the table for us with confidence that it wouldn't potentially fail. And so your question of ultimately we will, the contractor doing the new dam construction will have to come up with a plan for managing water. Whether they'll be able to use some of this structure or not, I guess I couldn't speak to, but that will have to happen.
I'm Casey Dar, treasurer, ID. We talked to some construction companies as well. They wanted more freedom in choosing their process of whether or not to use that dam or not use that dam. According to the different contractors, some were not going to be able to use or to get insurance to build below a condemned dam. So they would have had to take it out anyways. We are leaving that flexibility to the contractor to get the best possible deal that we could to build our dams. That's kind of where we're at with that.
Okay. Thank you. Commissioner Glick, please.
So you gotta, so you have to take the whole dam out? Is that what you're stating? Is that, because I remember when I went there to that, when we went and looked at it, they said they were gonna just inundate the whole dam every year and leave a structure sitting there. That's not the case no more.
Hey, Madam.
Why we stopped at 5,400 for elevation is we need to control the silt. We do not need to make our problem somebody else's problem. And so that's the main reason why we settled on that elevation, was this way we are able to leave enough of the dam intact to control the silt. So that way we're not messing up Goshen and Platte and everybody below us.
Okay.
We're still able to control the silt, and that's why we're leaving that much of the dam there.
Okay, and then like last year on, was it May 2023 is when structure started to show stress. That was because of the runoff, right? Is that what it was? That like it started to fill up too fast?
We had a restriction.
Did you?
As
Yeah,
it
I mean,
started
I
coming
understand
up
that,
to
but I mean,
5475, we had to let water out as rapidly as we could to stay under that restriction. And we are hypothesized that potentially during that mass exodus of water where we had to open the valves all the way, that could have potentially caused a shift in one of the buttresses. Like I said, I'm not an engineer. I don't know. That's just kind of our hypothesis going forward.
okay. When you guys, let's see. So you're gonna cut some of those sections out to make sure that the runoff won't make the rest of the dam fail. Is that what it is?
Yeah, Madam Chair, ultimately, we had evaluated that and determined that won't work. That's not a satisfactory solution. We have to actually take the whole dam down.
Okay. That's terrible. And that is terrible. Hey, just for everybody's knowledge, who's the one that designed it and I know that they done other dams like that, maybe not even in this country, but they all failed, right? This is the last one, and it's kind of a tough situation. No more questions. Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Cott?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a question for the engineers. Of course, there's quite a few fish in that reservoir. What happens to the fish? It's probably too bad, but and then second, what do you do with all the concrete?
Yeah, Madam Chair, Commissioner, I think you guessed what happened to the fish. Now, as for the concrete, specifically the concrete that gets removed, brought down, the thought at the moment is to use that as rubble, like riprap, and push it underneath the remaining slab in some way. Yeah, like the figure up there to help support what remains and also help to pass any flood water from the remaining structure down to the creek channel downstream. It may require additional stabilization depending on what we end up with. I think we'd like to specify some minimum size to make sure that this isn't moving. But we would also have kind of a maximum size just to be workable. And so yeah, that'll be really working with the contractor to figure out what we think we may end up with and making sure that the final product is, we can be confident it will remain stable.
If I could add to that, Madam Chairman, then the follow-up to that question is what happens to the rubble? When we do this ultimately becomes the final dam removal process. And so when we build the new dam, part of the reason we're leaving it at the 5,400 level is to maintain and keep the sediment upstream of the existing dam. So therefore we can leave the rubble, we can leave the sediment in the reservoir and just inundate it, and it doesn't change our storage volumes. We don't have to haul it away. So in that sense, we were just getting ahead of the game of something we were going to have to manage through with the construction of the new dam. So that rubble will stay in place and be inundated in the new reservoir.
Thank you, Corey. Representative Nyman?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just a curiosity question to the district. What's your plan? I mean, what's going to happen to you guys with your inability to be able to irrigate your lands? I mean, is there anything in this that could be salvaged from the standpoint of being able to manage flows or anything like that to help you guys be able to function?
I think between the two of us, we can answer that. And so some of this is unknown because we never know just how much runoff is going to come down each year, depending on the snowpack, to manage this. So there could be a large volume going down the creek, which could take out infrastructure that's already in place. The shareholders will, we've already started discussions on that. They may have to move back their calving areas. They may have to change some, it could take out their bridges. As far as the irrigation season, this could be earlier now. We're going to be seeing discharges maybe April, May. A lot of these larger shareholders with pivots, that's too early to turn them on a lot because they could freeze. Our mains and our laterals could still have ice and snow in them. So this is presenting a challenge. It's going to have to be a lot of discussions. How are we going to appropriate that run off through everybody, the smaller shareholders, the larger shareholders? So yes, this is going to be a challenge. I don't know if that's answering your question. And our shareholders, we had a meeting last night. They're still paying their assessments. We still have expenses, but you can see their frustration. They won't be getting their normal water is they're not going to be getting that. And what's also happened is you don't miss a good thing till it's gone. And they've had this water. The older shareholders have had the use of this water to improve their land. They've made better use of the land, putting in the pivots, putting in more crops, and just always thought this water would last forever. And trying to tell them it's just like their fences don't last 100 years. This dam's not going to last, didn't last 100 years either. Concrete in our extreme conditions with high temperatures in the summer, freeze thaw in the winter. So what the point is they've improved this land so much to raise their crops and livestock, but it all depended on the water. And so now new generations are taking over those places. And as they take over, they're still dependent on that water, but now those newer generations have loans. They have loans on the land, they have loans on the equipment, loans on their homes, just the money you take to just operate every day to day just to live. So now they depended on those crops, they depended on that livestock to get that money to pay on their loans. So this is going to put a real hardship on the shareholders, and this could last 4 to 5 years. Doing early work orders could help speed up process, as you've heard before today. And maybe Casey has something to say on that too. He is a major shareholder, and he's got a young family, and as I had talked about earlier, not only affecting our shareholders, but our shareholders represent close to maybe 1,000 people. When you take the shareholders and their families, some of them have 3 generations living on those farms and ranches, and you take their employees, you take the subcontractors, you take our employees, you take these different people, that's around close to 1,000 people. And like I said, they support our local businesses. They, buy equipment, buy parts, support the churches, schools, and so on. So this is a huge, not only just a huge impact on the shareholders, but huge impact on our community. 1,000 people is a huge percentage of our population. So again, I don't, I guess what I'm trying to say is I'll let Casey talk to him for himself, how this is going to affect his operation.
Casey?
So last night we had to do the most difficult thing I've had to do in my life. We had to tell 104 people that you're no longer farmers. You've devoted your life to create this life. Can't do it for a while. Sorry, guys. Most of us thought we were going to be hit with rage, anger, frustration. And at first there was a little bit of that. But this morning, all of us board members were inundated with phone calls and texts. And a lot of it was hope. It really surprised me. They saw how well we were working with the WWDO office, how well we were working with the state engineers. They believe in our board. And a lot of them, because of my background going through messes throughout my life, we talked about it. We just sat down and talked about it. How are you going to do? What are you going to do? What's your plan? How are you going to do this? Everybody has a different route that we're going to pursue to get through this. We're going to do what we can It's the old farmer plow horse mentality. One step at a time. Look forward, keep moving, you'll get the field plowed. For me, I'm going to work. I'm farming at night, working during the day, hugging my family when I can. And I will do that until I get a dam built, so that way I can go back to being a farmer.
Thanks, Casey. We're sorry, and we're glad to hear that people are at least rallying around you. It's really a sad, sad situation. Chairman Steinmetz.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I just wanted to go back to that slide that talked about the percentages of the risk of failure. And I wanted to talk through that and then also talk through what, what we went past it. It was the one before that one when you were backing up. That one. Can you just explain that a little better? And then also how much flow you're basing your well, it left again. How much flow you're basing your modeling off of, because we're hearing the outlet can't take it, but I just want to know the estimate of how much you're talking about coming in and letting out, and how those small percentage of numbers, because that's not, 2% chance, 1% chance, 0.2% chance. What are we talking about there?
Yeah, Madam Chair, Senator, bear with me as I kind of work through your question. So just to consider the dam failure, and those numbers on the upper right, that's really considering events that could come into the dam, exceed what the outlet works could handle, and fill it up. And we're only talking up to that 5420 elevation, so only 25 feet of depth in the reservoir. So the analysis of that failure is simply, we've got 500 acre feet of storage behind this structure, and it fails. What's that look like? And so using really standard modeling to analyze that, that's where we come up with these numbers of the flow that could be expected from that failure. The middle scenario of the 60-foot gap failure, just as kind of a gut check, looking at there's a long history of dam failure examples to turn to and learn from. There's a particular failure that happened in 1982 in Rocky Mountain National Park. It was a Lawn Lake Dam that failed up above Estes Park. And that dam was holding about 600 acre feet at 26 feet of depth when it failed. And the estimates on that were right at 20,000 cubic feet per second coming out of that failure. And the devastation that caused as it headed towards Estes Park and through Estes Park is really testament to what we're trying to avoid. These flow values in something like Laparelle Creek are just devastating, especially in the
What are the
context
flow
of
values?
a
Just
failure.
tell me, what is an annual runoff? What is the average annual runoff?
So maybe half the time, every year, there's a 50% chance of hitting something like 400 cubic feet per second.
Okay.
So, so go ahead. Do you want to expand, or I can keep going?
Go ahead.
So these other values you're asking about, the 2%, 1%, really what that represents, let's say the 2%, and looking at Laparelle Creek up there, what that really represents, we call it a 50-year, we can call it a 2%. It's just every year, based on the flow history on the creek, we can say that, every year there's a 2% chance that flow in the creek could hit 6,700 cubic feet per second. In the context of dam safety, and especially for high hazard dams, the standard for a high hazard dam is to be able to survive a probable maximum flood. And on Laparelle Creek, that's 120,000 cubic feet per second. Orders of magnitude larger than than what we're looking at here. And so what we did evaluate as we considered our options were, you know, conceding a little bit. We don't need to be considering a probable maximum flood for this remaining dam, but what is reasonable, be able to pass a 1% annual event, 100-year event, right? At 10,000 cubic feet per second, or even, you know, up to a 500-year would be reasonable for what to expect to prevent failure of what's left behind. And so that's where we were looking at these two values of 10 to 20,000 that whatever's left behind ought to survive.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Glick.
When you were talking about, like, you know, if you can take the dam out and the spring runoff comes down like it does every year, what kind of damages to the structures below that are going to happen? Do you know?
Madam Chair, Commissioner, we haven't evaluated that yet. What would be typical, you know, any creek to have a study done of what's a 100-year flood look like for inundation, and where does that get? That's a little bit of a question right now. We've kicked this around with the folks involved that it seems that that absolutely needs to be evaluated and communicated to folks downstream, you know, both regarding road crossings, but also folks, their structures. Talked with some of the irrigators last night, even just helping to make decisions about, you know, if they're calving typically on both sides of the creek, they may not be able to do that. And so that's something that's in discussion in how do we get that done. The analysis itself is relatively straightforward, but also talked with Converse County Emergency Manager and how does this fit in what may be required from FEMA? They would typically require these studies to be done. But ultimately, yeah, where does it fit in the context of this project, and how does it get paid for? How does that get done? That's actively being discussed.
Thank you. I think Gary wants to add something, then I'll come back to you.
As a board, and in 2023, and I'll have to ask these guys what the actual total flow was, but we actually, as a board, had to take hourly shifts, monitoring the inflows on that. We around the clock. It probably would have filled in just a couple days above the restricted level, but to keep it below the restricted level, we each were taking hourly shifts, watching those levels as they come up, and had a maximum discharge. And as a board, now some of that concrete, when they did core samples, is powder. Even if it was a 1% chance of filling that, or 2% chance, we decided we couldn't live with ourselves. If that thing started to fill and it had a catastrophic, dams like that don't just break slowly. There's not a chunk here, a chunk there. They just catastrophic explode. So all that water would go down, and if there was some loss of life from that, just because we said, well, we was willing to gamble on that 1% or 2%, we don't think in the next 5 years we'll have a flood. So let's just chance it. And that happened. I don't think we could live with ourselves. So going back to percentages, it really doesn't matter if it's a 0.5% or 1%. We can fill that thing really quick. That's why it's so beneficial to our shareholders. You don't have to drill wells or anything. We have a never-ending source of water. You just don't always know how much. But you get the snowpack in the mountains, you get a rain on snow event, and we got a lot of water coming down. So I don't know if that helps also, why it ended up finally, to this decision. It wasn't an easy decision. We lost sleep. And we know that the engineer's office, the WWDO, they're not our enemies. They've been working with us. They're concerned also, but it got to be, we couldn't take a chance. We've got shareholders that have been there for years. Like I said, these that have got to use this water, take advantage of that dam, that have scenarios. Let's just fill it with rock. Let's do, all these things, but all you're doing is putting a Band-Aid on a bunch of poor concrete. You can look at 100-year-old basements and they have cracks in them, but they don't have 200,000 acre feet of water pushing on them. And this dam, when it was built with a slide rule and those type of engineers, and they did it amazing. When you look at that, you just don't know how they did it back then. But they were just starting to experiment with metal, with rebar. There's not a lot of rebar in there. It's every other level. So that dam doesn't even have a lot of rebar in it, and that's why chunks are falling out. So anyway, I just wanted to add that.
Thank you, Gary. Casey, and then we'll go back to Commissioner
So as
Glick.
far as actual numbers, Phil, I, and Anna usually do the night shift because Phil and I are cabin, so we're up anyways. Night times when you see your large inflows for that reservoir. It's melted all through the hills all day, and the nighttime it just hits that dam. It's not uncommon to see 700-800 CFS coming in. There's been times on night shifts where I've seen 1,400. It just all depends on weather, how much snowpack there is, if it got rained on, how hot it is. There's so many variables that I'll be honest, personally, I'm not capable of calculating. So it's Mother Nature.
Thank you.
Creek.
Go ahead and state your name for the committee.
Bill Jargell, sorry. We've been my family's been along the creek for 50 years and that dam has served us very well, and it's served our community for over 100 years. We'll see significant losses in the creek to our infrastructure. It won't be uncommon for us to I have 2 miles of creek, and I'm sure I have 2 bridges and 4 diversions, and I'm sure they'll be washed out. But that's something we understand and we're willing to do to get this dam built hopefully within 4 years instead of 5. So
I'm sorry to hear it. Commissioner Glick, we'll let him go ahead and continue your question.
This, it goes underneath the interstate too, right? Yeah, that's what I thought. So that's gonna be, if the dam's not there, the part that worries me is the spring runoff, all that water that's gonna be going through there. What do they call it? It might meander or start jumping the stream. That's something you have to watch out for. I'm sorry to hear all of this. Thank you.
I'm sorry, Madam Chairman, Commissioner, that also, if you remember, if you've been up at that dam, that's a really narrow channel. And as it goes through the park and spreads out, so you're thinking, we could get a huge runoff, and it's like you said, it's going to reach the interstate. But that runoff may only last 6-7 days. It's going to be spread out. Whereas if it built up behind there and then all released at once, you're gonna, just like we all seen on television, the hurricanes with their that storm surges that they have. This could be like that when it hits that interstate.
Casey, go ahead.
One thing I have to keep telling myself, because I'm worried about the park. I'm worried about the stream bank integrity. I'm worried about the road systems. I'm worried about all those things. And I spend a lot of time thinking about that. But the one solution for all that is a new dam. As soon as that dam's in, my personal problems are just clean slated. And that's why we've really hammered the gas. We've worked amazingly with your guys' agency, your director and his staff. Phenomenal to deal with. The state engineer office, phenomenal to deal with since we've been in this emergency situation. This is one of those times where, you got a cow stuck in the feeder, get her out, get over it, get past it. And everybody has just streamlined. I know this is probably not the place to say it, but this is the most efficient I've ever seen engineers work. It's been beautiful.
Commissioner Craig?
Madam Chair, question for the engineers. I saw the timeline. I believe you're talking very soon, trying to let something for bid for demolition. Is that correct?
Yeah, slide 81.
Yeah, I can take a stab at that. The schedule up here is just the question that came up when, talking to the state engineer's office and others, is this possible? And this schedule was put up there as an example of, yes, we believe it's possible. It is going to be incredibly difficult. With somewhere between a 60 to 90-day construction window, we had to back calculate this. So time is of the essence. We have to get a contractor on board ASAP. We're actually going to initiate that process to, a contractor engagement and start procurement process to get a contractor on board this week and next week, really to issue an RFP potentially. We haven't really talked through the mechanisms, but it'd be, in my mind, is something very similar to like a CMAR procurement, where you're doing a value-based selection. We're telling them this is what we want to accomplish. We have the drawings. That lay out. They're kind of a performance spec. This is what we need the dam to look like after we're done, i.e. everything removed above 5,400. Give us your ideas and proposals of what construction methods would you use? And as Pete alluded to, it could be construction blasting, controlled blasting, blow everything up above that 5,400 level. Maybe it's a wrecking ball, maybe it's cranes, and they're taking it down piece by piece. We don't know that. And so we are going to evaluate, I'm hypothesizing now because no decisions have been made. We're trying to figure this out. But my thoughts are that we would be evaluating those proposals from contractors to select who gives us the best chance of reducing the risk by April 1st. Not necessarily would everything have to be done by April 1st, as long as a wide enough section in the middle is removed. And in theory, we would not have to remove everything above 5,400. We do have some alternative extents shown on one of the figures. You have to have the middle section and really the shoulders, kind of at a V, something like that, kind of a stair step. We might be able to do something like that, at least by April 1st. So we're going to evaluate the proposals. We're going to start talking to contractors this week and next week, get an advertisement for an RFP out shortly, or here in the next couple of weeks, to get a contractor on board by mid-January.
So follow up on that. So most likely what I'm hearing you say is that the intention is to have enough of that structure removed to keep the water level below that 5,400 or 5,420 elevation that you've mentioned. And then if you weren't able to complete the work, they'd have to be on hold until high water was passed and then finish it. And then what's your timeline on beginning construction on the new dam? And what is the location of the new dam? Early on in this process, we saw some various things that, showed construction of the new dam below the existing dam. And someone else mentioned that the existing dam was going to remain in place. Well, that's not an option now. So I'm assuming the new dam is still below downstream of the existing dam. Is that correct?
Madam Chair, that is correct. Nothing has changed through this process on the ultimate design of the new dam. It is immediately downstream of the existing dam, approximately about 200 feet. We will have to have a cofferdam. Now, we were hoping to use the existing dam as a cofferdam. We will have to we'll let the contractor ultimately decide that process, but a cofferdam will need to be put in place. Just like they built the dam, 115 years ago, they didn't have a dam to control flows, just like they did in the 70s as well. They had a small cofferdam, a berm type structure to help them control the water flows and pipe it around through their construction site. And so, yes, that's all moving forward. We hope to start construction. We worded it as significant construction on the structure in early 2026, early work packages through things like aggregate procurement, or maybe even advancing the foundation excavation objective to start digging the rock out and prepping for that. That could, if the permitting process goes as we're hoping, it may be possible, if we get a CMAR on board, to start excavating the rock out is sometime in 2025. That could advance that construction schedule, because as what's been talked about is how do we manage these flows? And Casey said it perfectly. The best way to manage these flows to mitigate risk downstream is to build a new dam. And if we can start that new dam construction in 2026, as we showed that schedule, well, then we're really talking about, because it will start to raise up. We'll get to those outlet works in the first year. Sometime in 2026, you're going to start to see attenuation of any of those large flood events, because the probabilities are we're probably not, you know, a 2-year, 4-year, 5-year event are not causing significant damage downstream. It's those larger events, a 20 or a 50-year event, that are going to cause the damage downstream. So we're somewhat holding, keeping our fingers crossed. We avoid a 50-year event in the next 2 years. That's the time period we're looking at. And at that point, the new dam will be constructed, will be starting to be constructed, and that will add as an attenuating feature to help protect that downstream infrastructure.
So I do have one other question. I think you have already told us, but I don't know that I logged it away to memory. What's the current the capacity of the current outlet works of the current dam?
Yeah, Madam Chair, of course, it's head driven. A couple benchmarks, maybe at the restriction elevation of 54, 75, you could push about 350 cubic feet per second. I think at about 5440, you'd be in the range of maybe 200 cubic feet per second.
So significantly less than what your inflows are during high water.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Chair,
Commissioner Suker?
just a quick question, I guess, or concern, I guess. Do you know how much silt is in the reservoir from maybe the original stream flow to where it is today?
And Madam Chair, Commissioner, I do know, I'm trying to remember the number. We do have bathymetry of the existing.
You have it?
A reservoir, and it says about 25 feet deep behind the dam. And the volume of that is, I want to say, in the range of, 100 acre feet. 100 acre feet or more.
Do you anticipate removing any of the silt in your reconstruction?
That has not been addressed. We didn't anticipate that, just as it'd be a significant cost, to gain, in the range of 100 acre feet is all. And so, managing sediment, for any kind of storage purposes doesn't really fit, because we can just make up that difference with the ultimate elevation of the new dam.
The
Make sure we have
elevation of
that
the
20,000 acre foot storage. And so beyond that, the sediment management is really just limited to making sure it stays where it's at until the new dam's in place.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Jens.
Madam Chair, thank you. For the members of the irrigation district. So, I mean, it's a really unfortunate situation, but it sounds like there really is only one path moving forward. Trying to hold the dam back, even with the risk, still means that there's going to be pain down the road if you decided to keep the dam for whatever reason. But I think you guys clearly agree that the risk isn't worth it. So moving forward, would you say that really what you would like to see now as an irrigation district is how do we build a new dam as soon as possible?
That's correct. And of course, starting early work packages would help, making up the shortfall. If, wherever the money's available to get us to the end, we want to finish it, theoretically, we want to get to that 100% design, get our CMAR on board and start construction. And this has presented a whole new sense of urgency. Sometimes a bad thing can actually turn into maybe a better thing in a way. I mean, you try to look for the good things and everything, and this has definitely put a fire under everybody. So hopefully this does speed up the process.
Casey?
So the reason why we didn't come with an ask today is because we don't know. We're waiting to get a number from our CMAR. We are, like I said, we're agriculturalists. Margins are tight. We are frugal individuals. We don't want to come here asking for the moon when we don't need it. And so at some point, we are going to have to come back for an ask. We're beating the trees for other funding. We've had conversation with commissioners, mayor of our town, NRCS. We are working very hard to find every possible funding source that we can for our district. But there's going to be a time where we're probably going to have to come back with an ask.
So
Representative,
Yeah, thank you. So I think that there is space for us to at least prepare because we know that's what you guys are gonna want to come back for. I am, what the, I do want to move forward as fast as possible, and I think it's something that we should prepare for going forward. I think that, I guess my one question is there anything that we could have done better in the process? Was there anything that you think could have been improved, or do you think that we got lucky essentially, with the monitoring that we did have in finding the cracks sooner rather than later?
Yeah, I think there was a higher power looking down on us because I think this probably had outlived its source. The reason we had quit monitoring is when we was told to drop to 5475, we felt there wasn't that big a risk then, so we weren't monitoring those cracks. So it's a good thing, in hindsight, respect was still monitoring those. Everything moves so fast. We caught a lot of grief from our shareholders because this just happened. We just found this out the first week, really, basically of November. And there were a lot of hours, a lot of meetings, a lot of hours with a lot of different types of engineers and stuff, but we didn't really have that final decision. It kind of came down on a Wednesday, a proposal. We got the final draft and our comments with it on a Thursday. Press release was on Friday. And I don't blame our shareholders for being upset. And, you don't want to read something like that in the news. You wanted to get told by us. But there was no way to reach all of them. And can you imagine even we couldn't do a mass mailing that quick. And if you tried to call them, the first one you would have called probably would have took a 15-20 minute on each of them explanation how we got to this point. And once they hung up, they would have called their neighbor who would have called their neighbor. And by about the fifth phone call, it would have been so extorted and so many rumors going around, it would have been a mess. So anyway, kind of back up. It just happened so fast and that last night, that's what we did is explain to them why it happened so fast, why they weren't notified and where we're at. And again, we just need to get the dam built as quick as we can and get the funding. And we have a model. I mean, it's not like we haven't been doing anything. We finished the final contracts this morning. And that had slowed up the process a little bit, just with our attorney and HDR and Respect's attorneys going back and forth. Because we had to get it right. We didn't want to mess this up for our shareholders. And so those were finalized this morning. I look forward now to things moving a lot quicker.
great. And we do appreciate the accommodations you gave to, Director Mead, his staff, and how fast they responded to you. So thanks a lot. So we're glad to hear that at least, it was responsive. Oh, Speaker Summers, go ahead.
Madam Chairman, thank you. And to the district, I think we all bleed for you. And certainly those of us that are agriculturalists like you, we understand, how devastating that can be. I think one thing that it'd be good, for you, and maybe you've done it so everybody knows, but to make sure you quantify the impact that this is going to have on you folks. I don't know, is it going to be 40% of the production that all the ranches in that area put up? Is it going to, of their production, what is it? And how many, all of us can understand how many tons of hay is that? I think just as we all sell, or whoever's in the legislature sells this to the body, you need to understand what the impacts are and what this really means to you people. I think most of us understand that, but it still has to be, I think it's good to get that out there.
Yeah, thank you for that suggestion. And, something else we haven't talked about is as they have to, their production is going to go down, which means they're going to start relying on outside areas to buy that hay. And, it's going to take loans and things like this. It's going to put a demand and a stress on the outlying areas. Are they going to be able to produce enough hay for their own use and our shareholders? How far away are they going to have to go to buy and bring in hay, because they can't produce it themselves? And that's been a discussion with a lot of our larger shareholders.
Representative Nyman?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And one other curiosity too, you had alluded to it to begin with. This is going to affect or has had already effect on wells because that water was backed up and it was energizing aquifers there or creating wells. Has there been any discussion about, the long-term implications of are these house wells? Are these city wells, municipal impacts that are going to be taken care of or are going to be in this? And has there been any discussion about what it's going to do to mediate those, those impacts?
So, my farm is roughly 2 miles from the dam, and my well traditionally put out 8 GPM. I'm down to about 4 right now. The well that we are all extremely concerned about is the city of Douglas has a well on the Barber Ranch, which is 3 miles from my house, and it supplies a very significant amount of water to Douglas, Wyoming. We haven't done the study because I'll be honest, it takes money to do studies. And right now we're just trying to make sure everybody's safe. That's our priority right now, and make sure everything's safe, get this dam decommissioned. We haven't done a study on the well, but I can say firsthand that my well is taking a hit, and I'm really nervous about the cities.
Thank you.
And that, what he's talking about is just with the restriction. Because that's had an effect on the wells. We believe that's due to the restriction. A lot of the wells in the areas the gallons per minute has been reduced. It's hard to, this is an unknown. It's going to be a domino effect. We may not know because this just happened. We just drained. We got, complied with draining it so that we could do a better inspection. We just drained that in, what was the final, October? Yeah, completely.
Yeah, it was like the 16th, maybe.
16th of October, yeah. So time will tell, and it's still pretty early, but just because of the drought this year and a lot of the water being shut off in areas early due to the restriction, my own home well it takes on an odor when it gets low, and it's doing that. So things like that are starting to tell. There's my father was in construction for years. He's passed away, but and he remembers the dam, and he used to talk about how there's layers of brutal clay and so on up there that hits that, and then as it runs until it finally comes to the surface, because he built the interstate outside of Douglas, and he said that they always figured when they were building these roads that water was coming from that dam, that's where it was dovetailing. They literally lost scrapers in that it was so spongy from that water. And now we're seeing those areas where our hayland is drying up.
Thank you. Any further questions? Well, we're sorry. We hope, sounds like you guys have a plan of actions moving forward, hopefully as quickly as possible. And, we're just sorry to hear about this because it is devastating.
We'd just like to thank all of you for hearing us out. We really do appreciate your time. We do really mean what we say when we say we appreciate your staff as well and everybody else. Like I said, thank you very, very much from our shareholders and us.
Thank all of you. Appreciate it. Director Mead?
So maybe just one more comment. We've heard the concern about the Douglas well a couple times from the district, so I just encourage the district to reach out to the city of Douglas. They're very knowledgeable about their water resources. We've had some initial discussions with them, so we'll just encourage you guys to reach out to the city of Douglas on that. So, and then the other comment I would make is, we've had conversations with a number of state agencies about the situation. So it's kind of all hands on deck, all of government type solution. The comment about the interstate, have had discussions with YDOT So they're aware of the situation, Department of Ag, so they can come up and see if there's any relief type programs. Of course, the permitting agencies, so we can keep all that stuff moving very quickly. So doing the best we can to make the most of a horrible situation. So anyway.
Thank you, Director Mead. And I think that was our last agenda item. Is that correct?
Yeah, the only other thing is just a mention during the discussion agenda item for anything that anybody wants to talk about. I know we've got quite a few new legislators this year. So our office is planning to give an orientation like we've done in the past to any new legislators right when the session starts to help them understand our program and answer any questions. So I just want to let you guys know that, be aware of it. If you think of any ideas on any particular items that you've heard that people might have questions on that we can hit on, let us know.
Okay, and just a reminder, tomorrow we start at 8:30 here again, correct?
Yes.
And Chairman Stemets, you had a question or comment?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And we talked about this privately, but I would like us to add the aging irrigation infrastructure study for the entire legislature to see what we're up against with all of these issues across the state.
As part of that update or
Yes,
orientation.
the orientation.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Also,
Director.
again, tomorrow, we're cramming quite a few things into one day. We'll have all of our sponsors here like we normally do. So we'll keep things moving as quickly as possible, but try to answer all the questions you might have. So.
Great. No further comments? All right. Well, we are then adjourned. Thank you all for coming and attending. We appreciate it. And we'll see, pray all of you again tomorrow.